Chapter 260. With a few loud bangs, Yigohan staggered a few steps back, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, he took advantage of the situation and leaped into the air, stopping two masked men in black who were about to chase after Princess Raimu. His long sword was like the wind, and for a moment, he looked like he could hold off 10,000 enemies. The leader of the men in black laughed coldly and said, "Yigohan, our original target was only Princess Raimu, and we didn't necessarily want to take your life. However, since you want to die, then we brothers have no choice but to fulfill your wish." With a wave of his hand, the five of them simultaneously launched a storm-like attack from 5 directions. Yigohan's long sword flew out like a snake, and in the blink of an eye, it became a ball of light rain. He shouted, "Who are you? If you have the guts, don't hide. Tell me your name." "Tell me my name? Since we're masked, we don't intend to let others know our identity." "Yigohan, I think you're also a Tianxian expert. How could you ask such a childish question? Let me tell you, an old white face like you doesn't deserve to know who we are. Go ask the King of Hell in the underworld." The leader of the men in black laughed strangely and dashed forward. His wide black clothes fluttered in the wind, as if he wanted to cover all the light in the world. He shouted in midair, "Lao San, quickly capture that little girl. If you delay, there will be changes. Don't cause any more trouble. Leave Yigohan to us." With a shrill howl, his body swooped down with a sharp sound. His arms were wide open, and all 10 of his fingers were shooting out fierce energy. It was as if he was holding 10 long blue swords in his hands at the same time. With a loud crash, the momentum was really frightening. The only one among the 5 of them who had a slender figure, the masked man in black, did not say a word. She twisted her waist and sprung up. She was about to chase after Princess Raimu. Yigohan let out a mournful and long howl that shook the sky. His long sword was like a dragon, and the blue light blazed brightly once again. Yigohan slashed out more than 300 times like a storm, forcing the other 4 enemies to retreat in the blink of an eye. However, he was hit in the left shoulder by the leader of the black-clothed men with a sharp finger. With a pop sound, 2 arrows of blood shot out from the front and back of his body at the same time. Yigohan didn't care about his own injuries and roared again. With a somersault, he traversed 70 feet diagonally. With blood dripping from his body, he somersaulted out. Before he even landed on the ground, 99 swords rained down on him. It covered the slightly slender figure of the masked black-clothed person. The other 4 quickly caught up to him. However, Yigohan seemed as if he did not care about his life at this moment. Every strike of his sword was to die with the enemy. Every strike of his was to exchange his life for the enemy's. He only wanted to go to hell together. With his extremely sharp attacks, he laid out a death god's sword net in front of him that almost sealed off the entire street. The 5 Tianxian experts, who were at the same level as him, were unable to take even half a step forward. How could the desperate moves of the Tianxian experts be insignificant? It was obvious that Yigohan had the thought of risking his life. "If you want to touch Raimu, you will have to step over my Yigohan's dead body first." Yigohan had used his actions. He had used his entire heart, soul, and life to interpret these words. He had put them into practice. Every strike of his sword was filled with loneliness and desolation that covered the heaven and earth. Every strike of his sword was filled with a bone-piercing madness and loneliness. Every strike of his sword was filled with liver and intestines. Loneliness and desolation are always companions. Where can I bury my deep love in the world? Solitary sword of life. Solitary swordsmanship. Yigohan's solitary swordsmanship, at this moment, had fully displayed the ultimate polar step. There was only one thought supporting him: I can't let them hurt Raimu. Other than that, Yigohan had already entered a state of madness and selflessness. Throughout the ages, there is only me and my sword. Boundless heaven and earth, flying with the sword in the wind. Once this sword is unleashed, it will send you on the lonely road to the Yellow Springs. Once this sword is unleashed, it will not stop the tumultuous mortal world. Kill. Die. The leader of the black-robed men was so angry that he shouted loudly, but there was nothing he could do at this moment. Seeing that Princess Raimu was being held back by Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei, he couldn't help but clench his teeth and said, "Go all out. Let's get rid of this guy first." Yi Guhan laughed loudly, and his laughter was still filled with desolation. His sword suddenly stabbed out, and halfway through, he suddenly retreated and stabbed towards the black-robed masked man on the left like lightning. One forward and one backward, as if it was made by heaven. Yi Guhan had been fighting for his whole life, and almost all of his battles were against numerous enemies. How rich was his combat experience! At this moment, facing the life and death of Raimu, who he cared about the most, Yi Guhan had completely displayed the peak of his strength. If not, how could Yi Guhan fight against 5 Tianxian experts who were at the same level as him, and not be in a disadvantageous position? Even if he had the heart to risk his life, to be able to achieve such a result, it was enough for him to be proud of his generation. Blood kept flowing out from his shoulder, but he didn't seem to feel it. It actually didn't affect his combat ability at all. Bang! The sword seemed to have collided with some kind of weapon, and the black-robed man on the left staggered back. Yi Guhan snorted, and his body swayed back twice. He took advantage of the momentum to swing his sword in a semicircle, and a ghastly blue light with the color of blood sprinkled out. He didn't retreat, and continued to exchange blows with the 3 enemies. His sword momentum was exhausted, but he didn't change his move. He jumped up, and his legs were like a black dragon twisting a pillar. With a bang, he collided with the palms of another black-robed masked man head-on. With a muffled groan, the black-robed masked man's body moved back, and Yi Guhan fell out like a kite with a broken string. A few streaks of blood spurted out from his nostrils. The black-robed masked man had gathered his strength to attack, but Yi Guhan was fighting with the remaining strength after fighting 4 people in a row. The difference between them was self-evident. However, Yi Guhan still didn't retreat. Instead, he straightened his body in midair, and fluttered in the air to block another black-robed masked man who had just managed to escape with great difficulty. This man was Lei Wu Bei's second disciple, Zhou Jianming. He had an irritable temperament. He had seen that Yi Guhan couldn't be beaten to death, and had been pestering him endlessly. So, he suddenly shouted, raised his greatsword, and hacked it down head-on. This sword had been infused with the Xian Qi of his entire body. So, Yi Guhan would have to make way if he wanted to dodge. In fact, his body's current condition wouldn't be optimistic if he didn't dodge. In fact, it was extremely likely that he would be defeated and killed. Yi Guhan's eyes turned blood-red. Then, he suddenly retreated. Zhou Jianming was overjoyed, and took advantage of this opportunity to rush over. However, Yi Guhan's figure retreated, and returned to his original position almost at the same time. His long sword was like a gust of wind. Dang! 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 His sword hacked at Zhou Jianming's sword 3 times in a row. It could be said that Yi Guhan had anticipated this. But Zhou Jianming's momentum had reached its peak. So, his spirit had been exhausted. So, Yi Guhan's 3 sword strikes had weakened him. In fact, he was on the verge of exhaustion. Zhou Jianming felt as if his chest had been struck by a 1,000-kilogram sledgehammer. He couldn't help but turn pale. He staggered back a few steps, and spat out a mouthful of blood. His own strength was actually not weaker than Yi Guhan's. However, he spent most of his time in the mountains and didn't have much experience in Jianghu. Usually, he only sparred with his fellow apprentices. Compared to Yi Guhan, who was a super assassin who had fled Jianghu for his entire life, his combat experience was worlds apart. Therefore, although the two of them were evenly matched, Zhou Jianming had suffered a great loss in the first exchange of blows. This was also thanks to Yi Guhan's previous injuries, and his Xian Qi had been greatly depleted. Otherwise, when experts exchanged blows, life and death could be decided in an instant. This one move's difference was enough to take Zhou Jianming's life. Yi Guhan secretly thought that it was a pity. If his attack had been successful, and he had broken through the opponent's encirclement, he might have had a chance to escape unscathed. Although Yi Guhan seemed to have the upper hand in this move, it wasn't easy. His body was counterattacked by his opponent's Xian Qi, and he couldn't help but lean back a little. His sword quickly drew a half-circle, buzzing and vibrating, and covered his entire body. However, he only had time to do this step. His breath was almost stuck in his throat, and he couldn't move as flexibly as before. After a fierce battle, every move was desperate, and it could be said that most of Yi Guhan's strength had been consumed. With his body alone, he had resisted the siege of 5 Tianxian experts of the same level. It was already a miracle that Yi Guhan was able to defend and attack until now. If it was said that his sword was like a rainbow, and he was seeking death first, even the sum of the 5 opponents couldn't compare to Yi Guhan. Unfortunately, human strength was limited. At this moment, Yi Guhan was gradually in a state of exhaustion. A sharp whistle sounded. The 4 people were shocked to see that Zhou Jianming had almost lost his life. They couldn't help but rush over with their swords and eyes red. Everyone's eyes were filled with a cold, murderous aura of shame and anger. They had 5 Sky Xian experts on their side, but they had been blocked by a single person. This was a great humiliation. Victory or defeat, it all depended on this one move. Yi Guhan laughed bitterly in his heart. It seemed that today, his old life was going to be left here. He didn't know if Raimu, that girl, she had escaped far away. The dim blue light on his body blazed once again. It was as if a bright star in the sky was shooting out rays of light. Yi Guhan had concentrated his remaining Xian Qi into this attack. Zhou Jianming roared in anger and shame. He leaped into the air and followed closely behind the 4 senior and junior brothers. He launched an attack towards Yi Guhan. Yi Guhan had accurately calculated the timing of his opponent's weapon. The blood-red color in his eyes had disappeared at some point in time. It was replaced by a tranquil and deep look. The only thing he couldn't understand was that the battle had already happened for a long time. Why hadn't anyone come to help until now? Where were the guards of Princess Raimu? Why hadn't the experts in the palace appeared? But now was not the time to think about this. Yi Guhan's deep eyes finally looked towards the direction of the palace. This gaze was full of vicissitudes of life. It was full of deep affection and loneliness. Endless loneliness and loneliness. There was also a strong reluctance to part. Xiao Xiao, from now on, I am afraid I can no longer protect your Raimu. Although I have never obtained you, although I have long been tired of this life, but at this moment of life and death, although I know that you are no longer mine, I really, really can't forget you. I can't let you go. I can't bear to part with you. Because in the end you're still the softest, and most painful part of my heart, Xiao Xiao. If I am no longer in the mortal world, will you be lonely? Will you be willing to shed a tear for me? Yi Guhan didn't have time to think about it, because the 5 enemies' swords and fists had already rained down on him like a storm. In an instant, his lonely body was drowned. Yi Guhan let out a long roar. He laughed. He laughed. His long sword was filled with determination. His face was calm and indifferent. He met them head-on. At this moment, all the memories of the past, the sweetness of the past, flashed through his mind. That year, that pure, long hair gently fluttered in the wind, that flower-like smile, that earnest entrustment, that deep expectation, and finally, that pair of pretty eyes filled with tears as they looked at him reluctantly. They slowly faded into the distance and became blurry. Yi Guhan's lips, which had been cold for 20 years, at this moment, revealed a trace of tenderness and affection from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 261. Li Residence. Li Yuran was alone in his room. There was a small portrait in front of him. The person in the portrait had bright eyes and white teeth. She was smiling sweetly. It was Princess Raimu. Li Yuran was worthy of being called a gifted scholar of Tianxiang. This portrait was extremely lifelike. It was evident that Princess Raimu had left a deep impression in his heart. However, Li Yuran's eyes were full of pain. Presumably, he has already started to act. Raimu. Li Yuran raised his head and fiercely closed his eyes. Then, he suddenly roared from the bottom of his heart. It was like the howl of a wounded beast on the verge of death. It was hoarse and dull. Then, he ferociously punched the wall. This punch was made up of pure physical strength. It collided with the hard wall. Suddenly, blood dripped from the surface of his fist, and dripped onto the ground. Li Yuran remained in a daze for a while. Then, he suddenly closed his eyes. 2 beads of tears flowed down silently. "I'm sorry. You're the person I love the most. I can only sacrifice you for the sake of my 1,000-year hegemony. Because I still need the support of my master." Jun Moxie and Jun Wui were slowly walking out of the aristocratic hall. They had repeatedly reminded Tang Yuan to purchase those herbs. Moreover, they had to store them properly every day. They were finally satisfied with the completion of their busy day. Then, they were on their way home. Today's matter had been very successful even though there had been a few unexpected incidents. Moreover, the wine had been auctioned off at a price that Jun Moxie hadn't even dreamed of. It could be said that he had returned from a rewarding journey. Even the third prince's shameless act of taking advantage of the tigers might wasn't a bad thing. After all, the young Master Jun had successfully planted that seed in little Yang Mo's mind. So, it could be triggered or destroyed in the future. Moreover, the last 100 bottles of wine belonged to the Prince Equivalent Palace. So, it was the Prince Equivalent Palace's shares. So, it didn't seem to have anything to do with the Jun family or the aristocratic hall. It might be a bit shameless to say this, but it was the truth. So, Jun Moxie wouldn't stand up for the prince and the prince's family until he truly recognized them as his own people. Because it wasn't worth it. Jun Moxie wasn't a selfish person, but he would never do anything that didn't benefit him. This was the principle of an assassin, and it was also his principle as a person. It was the same in both his past and present lives. Let someone else be the hero. I'm just doing what I want. To put it bluntly, I can do whatever I want, and no one can control me. Absolute freedom. This was the biggest goal of Jun Moxie's life. Before the aristocratic hall had opened, Jun Moxie had once said, "I want the aristocratic hall to reach a point where it can eat for 3 years unless it doesn't open for business." However, the results of today's auction were far more than 3 years. Perhaps the entire family would be able to sit and eat for the rest of their lives. Hai Chen Feng wasn't able to bid for even a single jar of wine in the end. However, Jun Moxie had given him 50 jars of wine from the collection under his name. It was a free gift. This was the kind of treatment one should receive for one's own people. This Tianxian's shill had held up a sign for 1 million taels of silver a few hundred times. But, he had finally returned to his lair with the bottles of wine in his hand. Of course, he had announced to the public that he had obtained them from the auction. Jun Moxie was riding a horse, and Jun Wui was sitting in a sedan chair. The uncle and nephew were in a happy mood, but they were also in a heavy mood. They were thinking about their own plans for the future, and the arrangements of their men. They didn't speak to each other for the entire journey. The uncle and nephew knew that the upcoming operation would be an incomparably fierce battle. However, they had to fight, and they had to win. Not only did they have to win, but they also had to win beautifully and cleanly. However, the enemy's strength was superior to theirs. How should they fight this battle? From ancient times until now, the weak defeating the strong had always been a beautiful story. However, when it came to one's self, How many people could truly defeat the strong without suffering any losses? Even if it wasn't a fantasy, it was definitely an extremely difficult thing to do. The June family hadn't gone far when suddenly, June Moxie's expression changed. A white shadow had shot over from afar. He hadn't had enough time to see it clearly, but that small white shadow had already burrowed into June Moxie's bosom. It was squeaking anxiously, and its two little claws were constantly waving about. Its watery eyes were full of anxiety. Did something happen? June Moxie saw that little white's hind leg was tied with a light green cloth. June Moxie clearly remembered that Duguxiaoyi had been wearing light green clothes when she had left. But now, that light green cloth was stained with blood. Duguxiaoyi had met with an accident. June Moxie's heart suddenly tightened. He felt as if his heart had been gripped by something. Even his usually calm breathing had become chaotic at this moment. Suddenly, Duguxiaoyi's lovely and mischievous smile appeared in front of his eyes. When did I become so concerned about this girl? June Moxie didn't have time to think about this question. He only had one thought in his mind: I must go and save her. Third uncle, Duguxiaoyi has met with an accident. I must go and take a look. June Moxie clamped his legs together. The healthy horse neighed and its front hooves reared up. It hadn't even touched the ground when its hind hooves fiercely kicked the ground, and it shot out like an arrow. The frantic sound of the horse's hooves resounded like thunder. June Moxie and his horse were chasing after Little White's shadow at a rapid speed. They had just turned a corner when the wind rustled in the air. A figure in green clothes had landed on the horse's back. But it seemed as if this person was weightless. The healthy horse didn't feel anything as it continued to gallop. The person who had arrived was Jun Wui. The face of this blood-clothed general was filled with a cold, murderous aura. How could an experienced person like Jun Wui not see the affection that Duguxiaoyi had for June Moxie? In fact, in Jun Wui's mind, Duguxiaoyi was already his nephew's wife. So, how could he let others bully her? Even if it was just the slightest bit of harm, he would never allow it. This was the Jun family's way of thinking. It was the same for Guan Qinghan, and it was the same for the little girl. Jun Wui would never let the tragedy that had happened to him happen to his nephew again. If necessary, Jun Wui would destroy everything in order to protect his nephew's wife and nephew's wife. So, how could Jun Wui just sit back and watch when he heard about this matter? The healthy horse neighed madly as it galloped madly. It seemed as if it had gone mad. The two horses crossed several streets, turned a few corners, and disappeared in a flash. Only a trail of dust was left behind. The autumn wind blew, and the dust gradually dissipated. Both Duguxiaoyi and son Xiaomei had the same idea. Let Little White go to the Dugu family to ask for reinforcements. In the face of such a strong enemy, only the Dugu family's experts would have a chance to turn the tables. As for other reinforcements, even if they did come, it might not be of any use. After all, the enemy was 5 Tianxian experts. Even though the two of them had the same idea, the young Little White could not understand. In his young mind, he clearly understood that his master was in danger. He also understood that his master had let him out to find reinforcements. But who should he look for? Of course, he should look for the most powerful reinforcements. It had to be said that Little White was very smart. In this world, there were only two people that he could get close to. One was his master, Duguxiaoyi, and the other was a very good person in Little White's mind. He was also the most powerful person in Little White's mind, June Moxie. This person was able to raise his cultivation level even when he was still a child. Was there even a need to say how powerful he was? Now that his master is in danger, who else can he look for if not him? Therefore, Little White went to look for June Moxie in a very competent manner. In his mind, he had never thought of going to the Dugu family to ask for reinforcements. Who are those coarse, bearded men? What's the use of looking for them? Compared to this great expert, they are far inferior. Even I, Little White, looked down on them, but then again, if Little White really went to the Dugu family to ask for reinforcements, it would be too late by the time the Dugu family sent their experts over. Therefore, Little White had unintentionally made the right decision, because, even if Little White went to the Dugu family to inform them, Little White couldn't speak. Even if the Dugu family judged that the little girl was in danger, they might not send their experts to rescue her. Moreover, there were 5 Tianxian experts in the enemy's lineup. What use would it be if there were fewer people? The sword and the saber fell at the same time. The palm that was condensed with sky blue Xian Qi fiercely slapped down. At the same time, Yi Gohan was facing enemies from all directions. If it weren't for Raimu, it wouldn't have been difficult for Yi Gohan to escape at this moment. He only needed to use the rest of his strength to quickly retreat. Then, he would be able to escape in an instant. Even if he would suffer some injuries, he would still be able to escape unscathed. But Princess Raimu hadn't gone far yet. With the strength of the 5 Tianxian experts, they would definitely be able to capture Princess Raimu if he retreated. Yi Gohan didn't know why they wanted to capture Raimu. Yi Gohan only knew that he would rather die than let Raimu fall into their hands. There are things a man can't do, but there are things he must do. Even if he knew that he would die, he would still go forward. What was there to fear about life and death? Yi Gohan stood like a mountain. The moment the sword was about to reach him, he suddenly twisted his body and dodged. He retreated and then advanced again. At the same time, the long sword in his hand flashed with a blue halo. It was as if it had turned into a curved sword. He flicked and stabbed. Poof! A long sword pierced into the left side of Yi Gohan's lower abdomen. The other 2 long swords slanted and almost brushed past Yi Gohan's body. Yi Gohan's clothes were torn and a large piece of flesh was spattered along with blood. Then, a pair of flesh palms heavily bombarded on Yi Gohan's chest with the force of a thunderbolt. Yi Gohan's ribs broke with a few cracking sounds. It was as if he was grinding his teeth. Blood flowed from his 7 orifices. But at this moment, a happy smile suddenly appeared on Yi Gohan's face. Or it could be said that it was a gentle and hideous smile. Accompanied by the crisscrossing blood on his face, it looked extremely tragic. Because... Chapter 262. The sword in Yi Gohan's hand, in the moment of the previous flick, sliced upwards along the armpit of a masked man in black. That man's sword was still in Yi Gohan's lower abdomen. He forcefully pulled it out, but it didn't move at all. Yi Gohan actually used his own muscles to firmly block that man's sword. He was truly fighting with his life. It was during this pause that the sword had already sliced upwards with the most tragic bloody light. That man screamed out in fear and decisively abandoned his sword. Unfortunately, it was already a little too late. He only managed to dodge the death calamity of his entire body not being cut into 2 by the sword, but one of his arms was no longer spared. A red light flashed, blood burst out, and his arm flew out from his body. Even half of his shoulder was sliced off, and even a layer of his facial muscles was scraped off, revealing his white bones. On top of it, there were tiny twisted blood vessels that looked like earthworms. That man's mouth emitted an inhuman scream, and he staggered backwards. His eyes revealed an incomparable horror as he opened his mouth and shouted, "My hand! My face!" Ah, but Yi Gohan's sword had already been withdrawn at lightning speed, and he once again took advantage of the momentum to stab out. Like lightning, all of his actions, not hesitating to take a few hits, were all for this moment. This sword. Yi Gohan knew that the current him was exhausted after a long battle, and he no longer had the strength to resist the joint attack of 5 people. The only thing he could do was to fight with his life on the line. With his combat experience, he could clearly feel that although these 5 people were all Tianxian experts, 2 of them obviously had unstable mystical qi. It seemed that they had yet to recover from serious injuries. He was now an arrow at the end of its flight, and the most he could do was to drag these two people to hell with him. But he had no confidence in those few who were still in good condition. Therefore, these two people were his first and only targets. The long sword stabbed out again with exceptional accuracy. The man had just struck Yigohan's chest with both his palms and was filled with the joy of killing his enemy. However, he did not expect that even though he had broken all of his opponent's ribs, a vortex would suddenly form in front of his opponent's chest, firmly sucking his palms in. That person knew that the situation was not good. He struggled with all his might and was barely able to break free. However, in this moment of delay, the cold and dense sword had already arrived in front of his chest with a bright blue light. Sword of death. He screamed for his life and tried his best to dodge to the side. But just as he moved, the long sword had already pierced through his chest, all the way to the hilt. Although it didn't pierce his vital organs, the profound energy attached to it had already caused his fragile internal organs to be in a mess. However, Yigohan had finally reached the point where he was at the end of his rope. The long sword had pierced into the enemy's chest, but he didn't even have the strength to pull it out. A man roared and the long sword fell with a swoosh. Yigohan no longer had the strength to resist. His right hand, which was holding the sword, had already been cut off by that sword. However, there wasn't much blood flowing out of the wound. His blood had already been drained, but his face still carried a mocking smile. His eyes, however, were filled with gentleness, looking in one direction. That direction was the imperial city. A man flew up and kicked Yigohan's body, causing him to fly up and land heavily on the ground. However, Yigohan still stubbornly turned over. Because of turning over, the bones in his chest that had already been broken let out a strange kacha-kacha sound. However, Yigohan didn't feel it at all, as if it didn't hurt at all. In his eyes there was no longer the arrogance of the past, nor was there the desolation of the past. It was filled with endless gentleness and longing in the last bit of time left in this life. He couldn't see his beloved, but he could only see where she lived. The direction she lived in was also good. The long-suppressed feelings that he didn't dare to express for a long time burst out at this moment. Xiao, I miss you. I miss you. I miss you. At this moment, Yigohan's mind was extremely clear. Many past events came one after another. He was already in a trance, but it also felt like a dream, a fantasy, and a reality. Suddenly, there was a gentle voice in his heart, softly reciting a small poem, over and over again. It seemed to be endless, but also faintly discernible, as if he was in a dream. I don't regret this life's deep love, I'm willing to wander alone. Eternal regret for lovers in a dream, I'd rather betray the heavens than my love. This was the farewell poem that Yigohan wrote to Murong Xiao 18 years ago. I'd rather betray the heavens than my love. I'd rather betray the heavens than my love. Yigohan couldn't speak at this moment, but his lips were faintly moving. If one paid close attention to the shape of his mouth, they would find that he was softly reciting this poem. Xiao, I left you 18 years ago, and I lost you forever. I only left you this poem before I left. You were softly reciting the last sentence at that time, and your tears kept flowing. I still remember that time, your long hair was disheveled in the wind at that time. Now, I'm leaving again, and I won't ever come back. Do you know that I'm still thinking of this poem at this moment? I'd rather betray the heavens than my love. Xiao, I've never betrayed you in this life. And I've never betrayed you. Zhou Jianming roared, and rushed forward to chop Yigohan's body to pieces. Lei Jianhong roared, enough. His Xian Qi is exhausted, and his internal organs are destroyed. He won't be able to live. Quickly pick up the fourth and fifth brothers and grab that girl. We have to leave quickly. We can't stay here for long. Zhou Jianming and the woman roared in grief and indignation. They each picked up the injured fourth and fifth brothers, and rushed towards the direction that Princess Raimu had fled to. Princess Raimu was pulled along by the two women. She would turn her head from time to time, and anxiously watch the battle in the distance. She saw Yi Gohan's body bathed in blood from afar, and he suddenly collapsed. Raimu suddenly shouted in a very mournful and shrill voice, "Uncle Yi!" Her feet were nailed to the ground, and she wasn't willing to move even half a step. She suddenly felt as if her mind had been struck by lightning, and her tears started to flow unknowingly. Uncle Yi. This man had been meticulously protecting her since she was a child. He had been an invincible elder in her impression. He had been desolate every day and had made her heart ache. He had been so lonely that it made her sad. But today, he had finally collapsed in order to protect her. Princess Raimu suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain in her heart. The royal family had no relatives. The imperial family never had any relative. She had understood this since she was young. Although her father was very good to her, and could even be described as spoiled, her father was too dignified. Although she wanted to act like a spoiled child in her father's arms and enjoy his embrace, her father would not be able to hold her for too long before something else came up. Then, he would return to the dignity of an emperor. Emperor and father, these two titles, the emperor would always be the father. When a father became the emperor, he would no longer be the father of a daughter. Only in front of Uncle Yi could Princess Raimu truly feel like a father. She could act spoiled in front of Uncle Yi and throw a tantrum. Although she always called Yi Gohan Uncle Yi, deep in her heart, Princess Raimu had already regarded Yi Gohan as her father, her real father. He spoiled her so much. He did everything for her, but when she did something wrong, he would get angry, and he would beat her mercilessly. But he was really good to her. He had always been by her side, never showing up, never fighting for anything, never asking for anything. He always watched her from a corner, as if he was satisfied with that. But every time she was in danger, he was the first one to protect her. When the three royal brothers bullied her and made her feel wronged, he was the first one to stand up for her. No matter what, he had always tried his best to take care of her. Now, he had collapsed because of her. He had been very tired all these years. Uncle Yi, do you need to rest? Don't you want your little Raimu anymore? Do you have the heart to leave your little Raimu like this? Do you have the heart to do that? Do you have the heart to do that? Uncle Yi, do you know that in my heart, you are already my father, father? Please don't leave me. Princess Raimu stood there in a daze. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know what she was thinking. Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei were trying their best to pull her, but she didn't budge. She was a girl who had lost her loving father. So, she didn't care about the consequences. Why haven't the people sent by the emperor appeared yet? Why didn't they show up when they saw Uncle Yi go all out? They should have shown up. I'll take my revenge if Uncle Yi really goes. I'll take my revenge on you. I'll take my revenge on you with my life, with everything I have. Princess Raimu roared in her heart. She was so angry that her chest was about to explode. But she couldn't say a single word. Tears blurred her vision, and she felt as if a 5,000-kilogram boulder was stuck in her throat. Her hands and feet were ice cold, and they were trembling. Her entire body felt as if it had been plunged into a world of ice and snow. The three black-robed masked men rushed over at this moment. Lei Jianhong furiously grabbed Princess Raimu with one hand. Raimu stood there in a daze, and didn't react in the slightest. Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei pounced over at the same time. Their bodies blossomed with a dazzling golden radiance. It could be said that they had reached the Gold Xian realm at such a young age. It could be said that it was quite commendable. The two men attacked at the same time. One sword and one saber attacked from both sides. However, the strength of the other party. Get lost! Lei Jianhong swung his hand, and the two women were thrown far away. I don't want to kill you. Don't force me to kill you. Who are you? Who are you? Princess Raimu seemed to have woken up from a dream. She wasn't afraid at this moment. I want to take revenge for Uncle Yi. Revenge. Her eyes were full of hatred and resentment. Who are you? Why did you harm me? Why did you kill my uncle Yi? Princess Raimu suddenly roared at the last sentence. Her voice was so loud that it startled Lei Jianhong. He had never imagined that such a delicate and timid woman could produce such a sharp and resounding voice. Chapter 263. You don't need to know who we are. You don't need to know why we're targeting you because you don't have a chance to live anymore. Lei Jianhong didn't know why he had blurted out such a brainless sentence under the intense gaze of the woman in front of him. I won't let you off. I'll kill your entire family. Kill them all. Princess Raimu's tears suddenly overflowed from her eyes. But she stubbornly opened her eyes without blinking. I won't let you off even if I become a ghost. The sharp and mournful roar seemed to cut through the blue dome of heaven. The bleak autumn wind in the sky suddenly whistled as it grew stronger and stronger. Princess Raimu's long hair was fluttering in the wind. It was full of a sad beauty at this moment. Lei Jianhong's pupils shrank behind his mask. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. His intuition told him that he was trembling. This strange feeling made him angry out of shame. He was a dignified Tianxian expert. How could he be scared by a little girl's words? This is too outrageous. Bang! Lei Jianhong flew into a rage out of shame. He slapped her across the face and cursed, "Smelly whore! You're about to die, yet you still dare to talk nonsense. Do you believe that I won't kill you now?" Princess Raimu's snow-white face had a swollen handprint on it. Her hair had also scattered down. But she was still glaring at him fiercely. Her eyes were full of resentment and unyieldingness. Lei Jianhong looked at Princess Raimu's venomous eyes again. He saw that the princess didn't seem to have any intention of backing down. His anger flared up again. He thought that this woman had a great connection with the culprit who had killed his 3 younger brothers with a flying dagger. 2 of his younger brothers had been injured by this woman's bodyguards. His anger rose up in his heart for a moment. His killing intent rose up in his heart. The 3rd sister saw that the eldest brother had a killing intent. So, she hastily advised, "Eldest brother, this woman is related to that person. You can't kill her until that person comes out." Lei Jianhong fiercely clenched his teeth. Then, he chopped the back of Princess Raimu's neck with his palm. Then, he picked her up and threw her to the 3rd sister. Then, he bade farewell and flew away. "Villain, put down the princess." Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei pounced forward. Although they knew that they were no match for them, they couldn't just watch them take Princess Raimu away. Lei Jianhong snorted coldly. His figure floated up, and 2 bang sounds were heard as the 2 women were struck by his palm. Blood dripped from the corners of their mouths, and they were sent flying upside down. The 3 black-clothed masked men leapt up at the same time. They floated up and down and disappeared without a trace. It wasn't that Lei Jianhong didn't want to kill these 2 women, but he couldn't. He had no choice but to do what he did to the princess out of hatred, but between Sun Xiaomei and Dugu Xiaoyi, one had the Sun and Tang family behind her, while the other had the Dugu family behind her. If something were to happen to these 2, the 3 great aristocratic families would cause a ruckus, which would be very disadvantageous to Li Shidi's Li family. A moment later, a small white silhouette flashed like a bolt of lightning. Then, it was followed by the sound of galloping hooves. The horse had already turned the corner and arrived at the scene by the time the sound of the galloping hooves was heard. The silhouettes flashed, and the 2 men jumped down. There was a pool of blood on the ground. Yi Gohan's lonely body was lying in that pool of blood. "Xiao Yi! Yi Gohan!" Jun Wu Yi cried out in alarm as he landed beside Yi Gohan. He had to pretend that his legs had been crippled. So, he sat in front of Yi Gohan and placed his hand on his left wrist. Then, pure Xian Qi surged into his wrist in order to prolong his life. Yi Gohan had lost a lot of blood, and his body had been seriously injured. At this moment, he was like a lamp that had run out of oil. His vitality was even dimmer. If it wasn't for the worry in his heart that he couldn't let go of, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. His eyes were blurry, hazy, and slack. It was as if his soul was slowly leaving his body. Even if he had infinite willpower, it was difficult for him to resist the loss of his vitality and the arrival of death. Suddenly, he was forced by Jun Wui's extremely pure xianqi. His consciousness immediately cleared. He struggled to open his eyes and saw Jun Wui's thin face. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he revealed an extremely urgent look. Anxious, pleading. Yi Guhan's eyes were full of such emotions. What the hell happened? Jun Wui asked anxiously. Yi Guhan was no longer able to speak. Jun Wui looked around. The street that should have been bustling with activity was silent. There wasn't a single person in sight. Isn't this a little too unusual? Where the hell did everyone go? Who knows what's going on? Jun Wui was anxious and angry at the same time. He roared, and the entire street seemed to shake. Still, no one answered. Jun Wui and Yi Guhan were of the same age. Yi Guhan was a few years older than Jun Wui. When the two were young, the Yi family and the Jun family had some friendship. So, the two were childhood playmates. Ever since the Yi family had declined, Jun Wui hadn't seen Yi Guhan for more than 10 years. He didn't expect to see his old friend on the verge of death. Yi Guhan could feel Jun Wui's pure xianqi continuously pouring into his body. He was surprised that Jun Wui's cultivation was higher than his own and Tian Xian's. However, he also felt that his vitality was gradually disappearing. It didn't improve even though a large amount of pure xianqi was pouring into his body. The expression in his eyes became more and more urgent. Then, a faint glint of anger appeared in his eyes. Jun Wui saw that Yi Guhan's breath was slowly weakening. So, he raised his head anxiously. Emo Xie Yu, can he be saved? Jun Moxie sighed. The third uncle's words had left him no choice but to act. In fact, he was confident that there was no serious injury in this world that he couldn't save with the help of the Hongjun Pagoda. Third Master Jun had been poisoned for 10 years. Hai Qin Feng's Dantian had been destroyed, and his xianqi had been crippled. Yi Guhan's life was hanging by a thread. But Jun Daxiao had never thought of himself as a savior. He didn't have a good impression of Yi Guhan or Princess Rime. Moreover, he didn't have a good impression of them. Moreover, it was very likely that he would get into trouble. There was no benefit at all. It was a losing deal. However, the third uncle had already made his move. So, he had no choice but to act. Jun Mo Xie squatted down reluctantly. He stretched out his hand, and took Yi Guhan's arm from Jun Wui's. Then, he closed his eyes and poured the pure xianqi of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune into Yi Guhan's arm. Jun Mo Xie's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. Yi Guhan's injuries had left the young Master Jun in a state of shock. This was because his injuries were so serious that Hai Qin Feng's xianqi had been destroyed. In fact, it could be said that Yi Guhan's injuries were fatal. In other words, it was a miracle that he hadn't died yet. He only had half a breath left in him. No. It should be said that he only had one thought left in him. He didn't even have half a breath left in him. The young Master Jun's spirit sense had enveloped Yi Guhan's body, and discovered that there were more than 30 large and small sword wounds on his body. His lower abdomen had been pierced by a sword, and his shoulder had been pierced by an unknown sword. These 2 wounds were visible on both sides of his body. However, the most fatal wound was on his chest. His ribs had been broken, and his internal organs had been displaced. In fact, his condition couldn't get any worse. Jun Mo Xie was extremely confident in his art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. However, he wasn't sure if he could cure Yi Guhan's injuries. The only thing Jun Moxie could do at the moment was to temporarily prolong Yi Guhan's life, so that his injuries wouldn't worsen and he wouldn't die on the spot. However, He wasn't sure if he could save Yi Gohan's life. Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei staggered over from a distance. They shouted from afar, "Brother Mo Xie, the princess has been kidnapped. Quickly go and save the princess." Jun Moxie saw that the two women were seriously injured. He wanted to go and greet them. However, he sat down when he heard these words. What does the princess's life or death have to do with me? Why do I have to risk my life? She's no one to me. Don't you see how miserable Brother Yi is? You want me to risk my life? You want my third uncle to risk his life? Why? Give me a reason first, however. The dying Yi Gohan's body shook when he heard these words. His deathly pale face suddenly became flushed. His eyes became fervent as he looked at Jun Moxie and Jun Wui with a pleading look on his face. This was the only life-saving straw. Yi Deku had discovered that Jun Wui had already reached the middle level of the Sky Xian realm. In fact, his strength had already surpassed his own. So, there was an opportunity to rescue the princess if Jun Wui made a move. Jun Wui's heart moved. He asked in a low voice, "You want us to save the princess?" Yi Gohan's eyes revealed a hint of joy. "Don't make a fuss. How can we save her with our strength? If you want us to die, you can just say it." Jun Moxie was still activating the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. He didn't even raise his eyebrows. "Third uncle, although your Xian Qi cultivation has reached the Tian Xian level, your body is still not good enough to walk. You've already made him like this, not to mention me, third uncle. As for me, there's no need to say anything. Even if I want to save her, I'm really powerless. The ancients say life and death are predetermined by fate. This is also fate. Do you think I'm stupid? Even if we really save that stupid princess, what good will it do to us? We'll have to expose third uncle's strength. We'll have to expose the fact that he's fully recovered. We'll also have to expose my strength. No matter how you look at it, it's not worth it. Now that I'm willing to help you, you should be content. If it were someone else, even Yun Bichen, the strongest of the 8 great masters, wouldn't be able to do this." Yi Gohan's breathing had been extremely weak, but it had suddenly become hurried. He looked at Jun Mo Xie with extreme anger. Jun Mo Xie could clearly feel that Yi Gohan's heartbeat had also become hurried. Yi Gohan's breathing had suddenly intensified, and his chest had vibrated. In fact, his broken bones had issued a slight sound. Yi Gohan stared at Jun Moxie. His eyes were filled with endless anger and sorrow. Suddenly, they gradually turned into pleading and pleading. Jun Moxie was shocked to see such a desolate look in his eyes. He had no doubt that if Yi Gohan could still speak at this moment, he would certainly throw away all his pride and dignity to beg him to save Princess Raimu. Yi Gohan's eyes became anxious. Suddenly, his face flushed and his throat gurgled. He seemed to be gathering all his strength, the last bit of strength, and finally 2 words came out of his mouth. It was so weak that it couldn't be heard. "Please save." Then, his head tilted to one side and he fainted. There was no more sound. Yi Gohan would rather burn his last bit of vitality to say these 2 words. Although he didn't say it completely, Jun Moxie and Jun Wui both knew and understood that Yi Gohan wanted to say, "Please save Raimu." He made this request at the cost of his life and his last bit of vitality. "Is he dead?" Jun Wui suddenly felt a little sad. He asked with a sense of loss. "He's not dead yet, but he's almost there. He is now in a state of suspended animation." Jun Moxie's hands were still exerting strength. If this state continues for a little longer, there will be no way to save him. Saving people is like putting out a fire. Hurry up and save her. Dugu Xiaoyi finally rushed over. She almost cried and grabbed Jun Moxie's clothes. "Hurry up and save Raimu. What are you waiting for? What does it have to do with me?" Jun Moxie looked at her inexplicably. "I'm just a commoner. Save the princess? This kind of thing should be done by a prince. How dare you ask me to do it? Isn't it courting death?" Even the master of Tianxian, Yi Gohan, was turned into a ragged sack. Didn't you see it? You want me, a person who has no strength to truss a chicken, to save her? How can you say such words? Jun Mo Xie spat in his heart. Bah! Princess Ling Meng is not you, little girl. Why should I do such a stupid thing? I came here in a hurry for you. I didn't expect there would be such a big trouble, you. Boo-hoo. What should I do? Dugu Xiaoyi was confused. She suddenly remembered that Jun Moxie couldn't even defeat her with his ability. How could he be a match for those masters of Tianxian? What did she say just now? In addition to regret, he was also at a loss as to what to do. But why haven't those palace guards appeared yet? The speaker was unintentional, but the listener was interested. When she said this, Jun Wui and Jun Moxie were shocked. They looked at each other and had a tacit understanding. Mo Xie, for the sake of Yi Gohan, we should also help him. Moreover, she is the princess. Jun Wui said tactfully. He could see that his nephew didn't like Princess Raimu at all. If he didn't say anything, he was afraid that Jun Moxie wouldn't have interfered. Not to mention the princess, even if he had helped Yi Gohan a moment ago, given his nephew's temperament, he might have ignored him if he hadn't opened his mouth. Based on his understanding of his nephew, he was absolutely capable of doing such a thing. In fact, it was a matter of course. He had a clear conscience. I'm not going. I'm not interested. Jun Moxie flatly refused his third uncle. He faintly felt that there was a lot of inside information. His identity had been exposed, and the consequences would be very bad. I don't care even if she's the daughter of an immortal, as long as she has nothing to do with me. I might as well tease Little White if I have the time to do so. Besides, Jun Moxie has never done anything that doesn't benefit him. You're not going. I'm going. Jun Wui was somewhat angry. He put his hands on the ground and jumped onto the horse's back. I'm not doing this for the princess. I'm doing this for Yi Gohan. Yi Gohan is doing this for Raimu, just like your grandfather was doing this for you. How can we sit back and do nothing about it? Chapter 264. No matter what Jun Wui had said, Jun Moxie wouldn't have agreed. But this incident had stirred up a deep emotion in Jun Moxie's heart. Jun Moxie's heart shook from the bottom of his heart. Jun Zhan Tian had brazenly sounded the war drums, mobilized the army, and bathed the capital in blood. His heart couldn't help but warm up. This incident had moved Jun Moxie the most. Hitman Jun understood that the third uncle's decision was more emotional than rational. If Jun Wui were to act, then it wouldn't matter whether the princess was saved or not. It would only bring harm to the Jun family. But a gentleman has to do something, and there are some things he shouldn't do. Therefore, if the third uncle were to act, then this matter might not be able to be covered up. But if he were to act, good. I'll go. Jun Moxie took a deep breath. Pure Xiantian Qi rushed out of his body, and poured into Yi Gohan's dried-up meridians to temporarily maintain his vitality. However, third uncle, you don't need to go. I'll go by myself. You go back to the Jun family first. Don't shake him or... I know as much about battlefield rescue as you do. Jun Wui interrupted him. Hurry up and go. You have a lot of confidence in me. Those are 5 Tianxians. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. He stood up, turned over, and mounted his horse. He clamped his legs together and galloped away. You big scoundrel, you have to be careful. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart suddenly tightened. She knew Jun Moxie's strength very well. At this moment, she almost wanted to stop him from going. Dugu Xiaoyi was very worried at this moment. She even had an extremely selfish thought. I'd rather not save Raimu. Big scoundrel, don't let anything happen to you. Jun Moxie's body on the horse's back paused for a moment, but he didn't turn back. The healthy horse neighed and galloped away. Dugu Xiaoyi's delicate figure trembled. Sun Xiaomei walked over slowly to her side and held her hand. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Sister Xiaomei. Am I being too much? Forcing him like this, if something happens to him, what should I do? Dugu Xiaoyi was out of her wits as she asked in a somewhat hesitant manner. No, don't worry. Son Xiaomei thought to herself, when did you force him? If it weren't for the third uncle's words, then even if you forced him 10,000 times, he wouldn't have gone. So, you didn't force him at all, because I'm afraid you're still unable to force him with your current strength. However, Dugu Xiaoyi would be very sad if she were to say these words. Therefore, Sun Xiaomei could only think about it in her heart. In fact, someone had been watching everything from the moment Princess Raimu's party had been ambushed. Then, Yi Guohan had attacked them. Then, they had fought a fierce battle to the death. Then, Yi Guohan had been seriously injured, and Lei Jianhong and the others had taken Princess Raimu away. This person was none other than Mr. One. He was the black-clothed man who had entered the aristocratic hall with Princess Raimu and the Emperor. According to the rules of the aristocratic hall, only 2 people were allowed to enter with an invitation card. Princess Raimu's party had 3 people. So, the Emperor and Princess Raimu were the only ones left. And that was Mr. Wen's. Mr. Wen possessed astonishing strength in addition to his status. Even Hai Chen Feng couldn't enter his eyes. So, the situation would have been very different if he had been willing to lend a hand. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Mr. Wen was very appreciative of Yi Guohan's sentiments. Mr. Wen had wanted to save Yi Guohan several times. But, he hadn't done so in the end. After all, the Emperor's plan to draw out that mysterious expert would have been ruined if he had taken action. The Sky Xian Peak expert who had saved Princess Ling Meng could be said to be a nightmare for the Emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. There was no other reason. The Emperor of the Tianxiang Empire would never allow such an expert to escape from his line of sight within the Tianxiang Empire. It wouldn't have been a problem if this person had been a hermit. But, he was related to Raimu. So, he was involved in the imperial family's dispute. It wasn't a good thing for such a powerful expert to be involved in the imperial family's dispute. Therefore, the Emperor couldn't tolerate this person's existence. He had good intentions, but he still needed to know who this person was. His identity was the only way to feel at ease. That mysterious Tianxian Peak expert was the same. And the other nightmare, the mysterious person behind the aristocratic hall, was the same as well. Mr. Wen felt conflicted for the first time in his life. He could only watch helplessly as Yi Guohan lay lifeless on the ground. Mr. Wen was a calm person. But, he couldn't help but grit his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Such a good man had passed away just like that. Moreover, he had used his last bit of strength and life for the sake of the imperial princess. But, I could have helped her. But, I could only watch helplessly. Conscience. Hien. But, Princess Raimu has been taken away. That mysterious Tianxian Peak expert must be drawn out no matter what the reason is. But, Princess Raimu can't be harmed. This is the Emperor's entrustment. What should we do with Yi Guohan? He's on his last breath. Mr. Wen didn't have a choice. He couldn't bear it. But, he could only look at Yi Guohan's lonely body on the ground. He sighed helplessly. Then, he sprang up, and chased after the men in black who had taken Princess Raimu. He felt the wind blowing on his face as he sprang up. Suddenly, he understood one thing. I can draw out that mysterious person. I can also find out who's targeting Princess Raimu from behind the scenes. But, I understand the Emperor's motives. His Majesty doesn't necessarily have no ulterior motives. Yi Guohan's existence had always been a thorn in the Emperor's side. He hadn't said it out loud. In fact, he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. But, Mr. Wen knew that Yi Guohan's existence had always been a thorn in the Emperor's side. No man could tolerate another man's covetous gaze on his wife for decades. Even if he only kept this thought in his heart, it wouldn't do. The Emperor was also a man. His possessiveness would only be stronger. And he wouldn't be any weaker than anyone else. It didn't matter whether the other man had done anything. So long as he had this thought, it would be a capital crime. A capital crime that couldn't be pardoned. So, Yi Gohan must die. Other than a few of the more pressing, real objectives, this was actually His Majesty's plan to get someone else to do his dirty work. It's a deadly trap. No wonder the princess's bodyguards are so weak. They're useless. No wonder. His Majesty only allowed me to rescue the princess. No wonder this place is almost forbidden. So that's why. Mr. Wen couldn't help but admire the Emperor. He's the ruler of a country. His plans are precise. His thoughts are meticulous. I can't compare with him. His schemes are vicious. Mr. Wen couldn't describe his feelings as he looked at the three men in front of him. Jun Mo Xie spurred his horse forward, and continued to gallop through several streets. Then, he whipped his horse a few times, and galloped like an arrow from a bow. White foam started to appear on the corners of the horse's mouth. Jun Mo Xie looked around and saw that there was no one around. Then, he suddenly tightened his legs and threw the reins. At the same time, Jun Mo Xie's figure abruptly disappeared from the horse's back. The horse whinnied as it disappeared, and stopped. Jun Mo Xie had thrown the horse's reins, and it had wound around a small tree on the side of the road. In fact, it had coiled around it twice. Do something or don't do it. Do it swiftly and resolutely. Do it with all your might. This had always been the Hitman Jun's principle. Everything was just a decision that flashed through his mind. If he had decided not to save Princess Ling Meng, then even if Princess Ling Meng were to be chopped into 1,000 pieces in front of him, the Hitman Jun would only look on indifferently. At most, he would give a few comments about the blade technique being inaccurate, or that it wasn't sharp enough. But since he had decided to save her, then not a single hair on Princess Ling Meng's body would be harmed. His powerful spiritual sense instantly swept out in all directions. It was as if a meteor had smashed into the sea, stirring up monstrous waves that rolled out endlessly in all directions, covering the entire field. Jun Dashao's speed was several times faster than his normal peak speed. He was illusory as he moved left and right. No one could see this mysterious scene. But Jun Dashao's heart was very carefree at this moment. Ever since he had opened the second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda, Jun Moxie had discovered that his control of the yin-yang escape had become more and more proficient. Jun Mo Xie felt as if he had become one with the world, and as long as he willed it, he would be able to go anywhere he wanted. Especially at this moment, when he used all his strength without any reservations. Jun Mo Xie felt as if he had completely merged with the world. The art of unlocking heaven's fortune within his body was like the opening of the floodgates of the Yangtze River. It surged and surged, endlessly providing unlimited power. The Hongjun Pagoda's vast spiritual energy slowly seeped out and was absorbed. It supported the operation of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune without any hindrance. Through the operation of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune within his body, the Hongjun Pagoda continued to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. All of this seemed to form a cycle, an exceptionally perfect cycle. No wonder. Jun Moxie remembered someone from his previous life. He didn't know if it was a Taoist or a Buddhist. It was said that life was a sea of bitterness, and the human body was the only way to cross this sea of bitterness. Jun Moxie felt that this sentence was very much in line with his current situation. The young Master Jun wished that he could stay in this wonderful state for a long time. After all, this state was something that could only be discovered by luck. It was a pity that, how could the reality be as one wished? Suddenly, there was a strange movement in front of him. With a swoosh, Jun Mo Xie soundlessly traversed a distance of several tens of zhang, leaving behind a slowly rotating vortex in the air, which slowly calmed down. 3 people were constantly changing directions in front of him. They were rushing out of the city like a wisp of smoke. Their movements were quick and agile. Moreover, it could be seen that these three people's spiritual senses were very strong. In fact, they would avoid people in front of them in advance. They hadn't met anyone except ordinary people along the way. An ordinary person wouldn't have been able to see them with their speed. At most, they would have felt a sudden breeze blow past them, and wouldn't have been able to trace them. Chapter 265. Jun Moxie took a deep breath and sped up once again. He followed the three men at a moderate pace, and kept a distance of 30 or 40 feet from them. Suddenly, his spiritual sense fluctuated, and he discovered that someone was following them from another direction. Moreover, that person's cultivation was much higher than the three black-clothed masked men in front of him. Could it be someone from the imperial family? Jun Moxie pondered in his heart. He didn't stop his footsteps, but he had another plan in mind. Mr. Wen suddenly exclaimed in another direction. It seemed as if he had sensed something. But he couldn't find anything even though he looked around. But with his powerful spiritual sense, he could clearly sense that another unbelievably powerful expert had already arrived here. But why haven't I sensed anything? There was an open space in front of them. A few silhouettes jumped down from the top of the city wall and disappeared into the distance in an instant. Mr. Wen chose to follow them, and deliberately paused for a moment. He wasn't worried that the juniors would be able to escape from his pursuit. He wanted to see how that person had managed to evade his observation in this vast open space. Even the first great master Yun Bi Chun can't hide from my eyes in this open space. But Mr. Wen was disappointed. He waited for a while, but to no avail. The only thing he could feel was that the powerful aura was gradually getting further and further away. Furthermore, it was gradually getting further and further away from that vast expanse of land, and he still couldn't see anything. How is this possible? There's such a person in this world. Mr. Wen sucked in a mouthful of cold air. But a burning sense of heroism and lofty aspiration suddenly arose in his heart. Such an expert! How happy would it be if I could exchange blows with him? Mr. Wen let out a long breath and adjusted his condition to its peak. Then, he floated down from the city wall like a wisp of smoke. The soldiers who were guarding the gate didn't know what was going on. Then, he disappeared into the distance. Eldest brother, the fifth brother's condition is very bad. The xian qi I've poured into him hasn't worked. We need to treat his injuries as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm afraid. Zhou Jiaming's voice was urgent and anxious. Yi Gohan is very ruthless. My fourth brother's situation is the same. Lei Jianhong gnashed his teeth in hatred. His footsteps did not stop. Although fifth brother's injuries are serious, as long as he is nursed well, he will recover one day. However, fourth brother is destined to be a cripple. Even his shoulder was cut in half and his face is disfigured. Damn that Yi Gohan! I didn't expect this Yi Gohan to be so troublesome. We are 5 Sky Xian experts, and none of our realms are inferior to him. Moreover, the 5 of us joined hands to deal with him. But we still ended up like this. The third junior sister Fang Piaohong sighed. Fortunately, he won't be able to live. It's a pity that fourth junior brother. It's all because of that bitch Raimu. Lei Jianhong roared angrily. Wait for me to get some information about that knife-throwing thief. I'll make that slut regret living in this world. Who cares if she's some bullshit princess? It's just that we'll have to wait for Master to arrive even if we get some information. Fang Piaohong sighed. Fourth junior brother and fifth junior brother are seriously injured and on the verge of death. Sixth junior brother has no hope of ever recovering. Seventh, eighth, and ninth junior brothers are also buried in Tianxiang. Who would have thought that this would happen? She sighed faintly. Master will be furious if he finds out about this. Eldest senior brother, Master will arrive in 2 days. You must prepare well. What can I prepare? Lei Jianhong was somewhat discouraged. I'm afraid that my father will beat me to death. I'm afraid that I won't be able to get out of bed for half a year even if he doesn't kill me this time." He brought 9 fellow disciples with him, and now only the 3 of us are left. What kind of huge blow is this for him? It would be strange if he would let me off lightly. Zhou Jiaming sighed and said, "I don't think any of us will be able to relax. Master will arrive in 2 days at the most. Alas, I can't imagine what kind of expression the old man will have on his face. Master has put in so much effort for the sake of the 11 of us. Alas, I don't know how sad the old man will be." Fang Piaohong sighed. Her eyes couldn't help but turn red. The 3 of them were still talking when a forest appeared in front of them. They looked behind them to make sure that no one was following them. Then, they entered the forest without any hesitation. Hitman June, who was following closely behind them, also floated into the forest as if he was invisible. June Moxie had already realized that the people who had kidnapped Princess Raimu were the same people who had participated in the robbery of the Xiandan on that stormy night, Lei Wu Bei. However, he was shocked in his heart. The cold-blooded master Lei Wu Bei will arrive in Tianxiang City in 2 days? This is big news. The 3 of them were still very cautious even in that dense forest. They turned left and right, and suddenly stopped in front of a withered tree stump. They looked left and right to make sure that no one was around. Then, the eldest disciple, Lei Jianhong, stretched out his hand and pressed on an unknown place. The stump slowly moved away, and revealed a large square slab of stone. Then, the slab moved away and revealed a round hole. However, the moment the hole was revealed, Hitman June disappeared without a trace and entered the tunnel. This was the safest place to go. Lei Jianhong and the other 2 disciples adjusted the posture of their fellow disciples. Then, they slowly and cautiously entered the hole. After all, the inside of the hole was narrow, and the 2 disciples couldn't bump into each other again. However, they didn't know that June Dashao was already waiting for them to fall into the trap. The tree stump slowly closed up, and the ground was restored to its previous tranquility. There wasn't even the slightest movement. Mr. Wen had followed them all the way. He had clearly seen these people enter the forest, and hadn't left the range of his spiritual sense. However, he had been a step too late because he had to search for that formidable existence. The hole had already been restored to its original state by the time he arrived. Mr. Wen had searched the entire forest, but hadn't been able to find the whereabouts of these people. He had used his spiritual sense to search, but he could only sense that these people were nearby. However, it was difficult to determine where they were. He couldn't help but feel anxious. This is like burning the whiskers of an old cat. Mr. Wen had already guessed that these people must have used some kind of mechanism to drill into the ground to hide their tracks. But where did they drill into the ground? He would have dug them out if he had used his martial power to sweep the area. Unfortunately, that would have alerted the enemy, and he wouldn't have a follow-up plan. But Princess Raimu is still in their hands if I don't find them. What will I do if something happens to her? How will I explain it to the Emperor? Mr. Wen was in a dilemma. He frowned as he tried to think of a countermeasure. The cave led to a huge space. The soil around it had been flattened. It was underground and had a damp smell. You 2, hurry up and treat the 4th and 5th brother's injuries. I'll interrogate this slut, Lei Jianhong said with a murderous look in his eyes. Eldest brother, I know that you're angry with Princess Raimu because of our younger brother. But you still need to consider your methods. Fang Piaohong hesitated for a moment. Then, she said, I can see that younger brother Yu Ran's heart is in great pain. I think we haven't exposed our identities. So, there's no harm in letting younger brother Yu Ran be a good person. He can act like a hero to save the damsel in distress. Then, he can rescue this girl. It'll be a wonderful thing if he succeeds Yu Ran. That's fine. I won't harm her life for younger brother Yu Ran's sake. Lei Jianhong clenched his teeth. Fang Piaohong snorted. She didn't say anything else. Instead, she started to treat her younger brother Yu Ran's injuries. June Moxie's heart skipped a beat. Younger brother Yu Ran? That boy Li Yuran won't be able to get rid of the name Yu Ran. Could it be that Li Yuran is also involved in this big incident? Lei Jianhong picked up Raimu and placed her against the wall. Then, he reached out and patted her head. Princess Raimu woke up as a pure Xian Qi entered her body. You evil thief! Quickly let me out! Princess Ling Meng had just opened her eyes when she shouted out in anger. I want to see my Uncle Yi. Let me go. Your Royal Highness, it's very easy for you to get out. You only need to answer one of my questions. Then you'll be able to leave, Lei Jianhong sneered. Those throwing knives in your bosom, they're your treasures. Your Royal Highness shouldn't be unfamiliar with them, right? Honorable Princess Raimu. I'll let you go as long as you tell me who the owner of those knives is. I won't go back on my word. The owner of those throwing knives? Princess Raimu opened her eyes wide in astonishment. She hadn't expected that these people would kidnap her for this matter. I've never seen that expert. So, how would I know where he came from? Ha ha! Princess, you're treating us like 3-year-olds. Lei Jianhong smiled ferociously. My fellow disciples lost their lives at the hands of that man. I've never heard of the existence of such a master in the martial world before this. But as far as we know, the only time this master has ever acted was when he saved the princess. Don't tell me that the princess has forgotten that he saved the princess when she was attacked by an assassin? And that was the only time he's ever saved her? If the princess insists that she doesn't know, then I'll have seen a ghost. June Moxie was startled in his heart. It turned out that Princess Raimu had been attacked by an assassin because he had secretly saved the Princess Raimu. So, I've saved her, but I've implicated her. This grudge is very difficult to settle. But, how did these people know about the connection between these two incidents? June Moxie's thoughts turned, and he suddenly thought of Li Yuran. So that's how it is. All these questions will be easily solved if we look at the Li family's point of view. You killed my Uncle Yi because of this question? Princess Raimu couldn't move. She looked at him with a venomous look in her eyes. It seemed as if she was about to spit fire. That's right. You won't be able to leave this place alive if the princess insists on not telling us who that man is. Lei Jianhong grinned in a low voice. I'll use other means to make the princess speak if the princess doesn't intend to speak. June Moxie urgently thought of a countermeasure. He had approached Princess Raimu a moment ago. He had thought that he could take the Princess Raimu into the Hongjun Pagoda and then disappear without a trace. But he had tried several times in a row, and it had been to no avail. It seems that no one else can enter the Hongjun Pagoda except me? Or is it because my cultivation isn't at that level? However, June Moxie's wishful thinking had been shattered since this method wasn't feasible. After all, he wouldn't have to worry about anything if he could take the princess into the Hongjun Pagoda. He was confident that he would be able to take advantage of the chaos. In fact, he would be able to get rid of those who were already injured. However, rescuing Princess Raimu at this moment was already a very good idea. These people are Tianxian's experts. I'm afraid that I'll suffer a big loss if I reveal my whereabouts. Lei Jianhong pinched Princess Raimu's chin and forced her to raise her head. Then, he fiercely asked, I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to tell me or not? I'll have no choice but to offend the princess if you insist on being stubborn. Suddenly, a sneer was heard. Then, a strange and cold voice sounded from Lengling. So, Lei Wu Bei has taught these pieces of trash? What cold-blooded master! That's ridiculous! The voice hadn't even faded when a blue light shone brightly in the dark. A small throwing knife suddenly materialized out of thin air. It carried a dreamy color as it slowly flew through the air. Everyone's faces were reflected in an azure blue color. Thud! The throwing knife pierced the muddy wall, and issued a sound as if it had pierced through rotten wood. The three people jumped up at the same time. Lei Jianhong covered his chest with his palms and shouted, "Your Excellency has arrived. Why are you hiding? I've been waiting for you for a long time." Zhou Jianming and Fang Piao Hong unsheathed their swords at the same time. They held their swords horizontally across their chests, and looked around as if they were facing a formidable enemy. A faint voice sneered, "You juniors think you can challenge me? You're overestimating your capabilities." Princess Raimu's eyes were filled with excitement as tears rolled down her cheeks. She struggled to ask, "Senior, is that you? I beg you. I beg you. Take me to see my Uncle Yi. I beg you to kill them and take revenge for my Uncle Yi." The commotion underground was very loud. Lei Jianhong's roar could be heard from several kilometers away. So, Mr. Wen was able to sense it from the outside. He had been paying close attention to the slightest movement in this place, and Lei Jianhong's roar had undoubtedly provided him with the best direction. He saw Mr. Wen jump like a gust of wind and arrive at the cave's entrance. Then, he continued to hold his breath and listen attentively. Everything would be under his control as long as he could find the hiding place of those people. However, Lei Jianhong and the other two had discovered something extremely shocking. In fact, it could be said that it was a terrifying and astonishing scene. Princess Ling Meng's slender body that was leaning against the wall suddenly floated up into the air. She remained floating in the air for a moment before shooting out like an arrow from a bowstring with a schwa sound. Lei Jianhong was alarmed. He threw himself forward, but he was a step too late. Jun Moxie had launched the Yinyang escape at an extremely fast speed. Jun Moxie and Princess Raimu had already broken through the stone slab by the time Lei Jianhong had made his move. Suddenly, there was a burst of bright light under the stone slab. Lei Jianhong and the other two men bellowed in anger. They then pounced after Jun Moxie. Mr. Wen was pacing back and forth next to the stump. He was hesitating whether he should break through the underground barrier to rescue Princess Raimu or wait a little longer. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise. It was like a landslide or a tsunami. The stone slab under his buttocks had been smashed into smithereens. The explosion had caught Mr. Wen off guard, and had caused him to fall down. He was about to open his mouth to ask when he saw a graceful body in front of him. It was Princess Raimu's delicate body. Then, three black-clothed and masked men rushed out one after the other. They surrounded him in a triangular formation. One of them roared, "You old bastard! You're hiding! You're hiding! Why aren't you running away? You're playing tricks on us. Let's see where you'll run to this time." Mr. Wen had just reached out to hold Princess Raimu when he realized that he had fallen into the encirclement. He couldn't help but complain. Chapter 266. How could a man of Mr. Wen's experience not be able to judge the current situation? Someone must have saved Princess Raimu. But this person couldn't reveal himself. So, he must have seen me come along. And he must have had the strength to help the princess escape danger. So, he must have thrown Princess Raimu to me. But how did this man know that I would save her? This hateful guy. My whereabouts have been exposed by this framing. What's the point of talking about the follow-up plan? This is extremely troublesome. His original plan had been very good. He would have hidden himself to one side. Then, he would have been the oriole behind the mantis stalking the cicada. Or, he would have been the fisherman who would have benefited from the fight between the crane and the clam. But, he hadn't thought that he wouldn't be the fisherman. Instead, he would have become the scapegoat. This is King outrageous. My whereabouts have been exposed. I can't find the whereabouts of that mysterious Tianxian expert. Moreover, I'm holding the princess in my arms. So, it's very inconvenient for me to make a move. And I don't even have a single helper by my side. Moreover, those people are looking at me as if they want to eat me alive. It seems that I won't be able to find out the details of the Princess Raimu's kidnappers. Mr. Wen wasn't afraid of Lei Jianhong and the others given his strength. But he was extremely depressed at the moment. How could I have allowed you to bring the Princess Raimu here if I had only wanted to save the Princess Raimu? I would have snatched her from the hands of the three of you on the way. Don't even talk about saving her. I could have killed you guys if I wanted to. Do you really think that you're a big shot? However, Princess Lingmeng, who was in his bosom, struggled and begged, Senior, I beg you to kill them and avenge my Uncle Yi. I beg you to save my Uncle Yi. Raimu couldn't see the appearance of that mysterious expert. But she felt a sense of security in her heart. This is the same expert who has been protecting me in secret like Uncle Yi. As long as he was here, I would be safe. Then, I started to worry about Yi Gahan. Then, her body was abruptly thrown into the air, and fell into the bosom of another person. The girl was naturally sensitive. So, she immediately recognized that this person was the senior guest of the Imperial Palace. He was also her father's mysterious friend, Mr. Wen. It turned out that he was also here. With these two great masters joining hands, none of those thieves would be able to escape. They would definitely be able to avenge Uncle Yi. With these two great masters, they would definitely be able to save Uncle Ye's life. However, Mr. Wen's embrace was very warm. But it lacked that warm feeling of warmth and a sense of security that came from the heart. Princess Lingmeng's idea was naturally very good. However, it was too whimsical. How could the world go according to one's wishes? The development of the situation was completely different from what she had imagined. There was almost no similarity between them. The more Mr. Wen thought about it, the angrier he became. He used one hand to protect Princess Raimu, and the other hand to launch an attack. He used the strength of his palm to fight against the three men. Moreover, he seemed to be skillful and at ease. In fact, he even seemed to have the upper hand. Then, he started to beat the three juniors in front of him. Mr. Wen naturally knew that this matter was the work of the expert who had been protecting Princess Raimu in secret. As the saying goes, one can always predict another. So, this guy must have discovered that he had been following them. So, he didn't want to expose his identity. So, this wasn't a strange thing. Mr. Wen didn't feel too bad about being framed by such an unfathomable expert. After all, the one with the biggest fist was the boss in this world. This was a well-known truth. But the problem was that Mr. Wen hadn't even seen the shadow of that expert from the beginning to the end. This was the biggest reason why he was depressed. It made him feel inferior. It made him angry. It made him speechless. Mr. Wen had always believed that his strength was extraordinary. But he had never suffered such humiliation in his entire life. Not to mention the insignificant Tianxian peak expert, even the 8 great masters wouldn't be able to possess such unfathomable strength. However, Mr. Wen had gained some insights from this fight. The more he fought, the more familiar he felt. Suddenly, he jumped out of the circle with a serious expression on his face. So, you are the disciples of the cold-blooded master. How is Master Lei doing? What has my Tianxiang Empire done to offend Master Lei? The disciples of Master Lei have joined hands to kidnap the princess of the imperial family. Have they done such a despicable thing? Don't tell me that you have forgotten about the Supreme Alliance? What Master Lei and Master Yu? What are you talking about, you old bastard? Go to hell. Lei Jianhong cursed as he flatly denied the accusation. However, his heart was filled with astonishment. Who is this old man? His strength isn't limited to the Tianxian peak level. He's only using one hand to deal with the enemy. But he's able to put us in such a difficult situation. His strength isn't inferior to my father's. Moreover, he knows about the Supreme Alliance. So, how did such a guy appear at this critical juncture? It seems that this matter won't end well. However, this old man's Xian cultivation is very high. But he's the one who has killed my 4 younger brothers. This enmity must be avenged. Old man, leave your name if you have the guts. The blood feud between us must come to an end. Mr. Wen snorted. He knew that he'd become a scapegoat. But he didn't try to defend himself. After all, he didn't need to explain himself to these juniors given his status. Moreover, would he be able to explain himself even if he tried to? Lei Jianhong's rude words made him angry. His body floated forward like lightning, and he slapped Lei Jianhong's face. Then, he shouted, "A brat like you doesn't deserve to know this old man's name. I'll let you go today for the sake of Lei Wu Bei's face. Even Lei Wu Bei won't be able to save you if you offend us again. The Supreme Alliance is still here. Get out of here." He held Princess Raimu in his arms as he finished speaking. His body was still facing Lei Jianhong and the other 2, but his feet had already left the ground. He slowly floated backwards. It seemed as if he had eyes in the back of his head. He didn't even touch a single tree in this dense forest. Instead, he flew away as if he was riding on a cloud. Then, a voice came from afar. "Tell that old man Lei Wu Bei that I, surnamed One, will look for him and ask him about today's matter." Lei Jianhong and the others looked at each other. They couldn't help but be overwhelmed with amazement. Zhou Jiaming spoke up after a long while. "That old bastard killed 4 of my younger brothers. But he still dares to boast shamelessly. He has no sense of shame and wants to settle accounts with us. Let's see where this old bastard will run when the master arrives." The other 2, Lei Jianhong and Fang Piaohong, complied in unison. The opposite parties' martial arts were very powerful. So, the 3 of them couldn't possibly avenge themselves. So, they had no choice but to give up even if they didn't want to. They could only wait for the master to arrive. Jun Dashao whistled as he leisurely arrived at the place where the horse was tied. He untied the horse and mounted it. He was very proud of his success. He whipped the horse and urged it to return home. In fact, Jun Moxie had already planned this when he had discovered that the mysterious expert was following Lei Jianhong and the other 2. "In any case, I have the yin-yang escape. So, no one can see me." "Humph. You want to investigate me? Let's go and fight each other. I don't have the spare time to play with you. This is good. I've rescued Raimu, and I haven't exposed myself in the slightest. I've completed the task perfectly and exceeding the quota. I don't want the princess to repay me. So, I'll just clap my hands and stare at her." Jun Wui and the others were anxiously waiting for him by the time he returned home. Why? Yi Gohan's injuries had reached the point where he could stop breathing at any time. They had asked the solitary eagle to pour his Xian Qi into Yi Gohan's body. But the so-called pure Xian Qi couldn't cure his injuries. His vitality had been exhausted. So, even a large amount of pure Xian Qi wouldn't be of any help. What he lacked was the vitality that his soul had bestowed upon his flesh and blood. No one, including the solitary eagle, could do anything about it. The solitary eagle had given Yi Gohan the purest and most gentle Xian Qi. Otherwise, Yi Gohan wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. Jun Moxie walked in with a disappointed look on his face. Everyone stood up. "Did you find the princess?" Jun Mo Xie shook his head listlessly and slumped into a chair. Picking up the cup of tea, he gulped down a mouthful and grumbled, "You guys think too highly of me. They've already been taken away for such a long time. Where am I going to find them? I can't find her." Jun Wui sighed and didn't say anything. Dugu Xiao Yi wanted to say something, but Sun Xiaomei grabbed her small hand and pinched it. So, she shut her mouth. Solitary Eagle snorted and said, "This person is already like this. It's a waste to pour more Xian Qi into him. Since Jun Moxie is back, there's no need for me. I'm going back to practice." He didn't say goodbye and left in a carefree manner. Dugu Xiao Yi curled her lips and said, "This old man doesn't know anything except how to take someone's pulse. But He still has the nerve to be a doctor? How did your June family hire such a swindler? What a waste of rice. This sentence made the solitary falcon, who was walking outside the door, stagger and almost fall. He snorted angrily. What's wrong with this little girl? If this old man hadn't extended his xian qi to prolong his life, would this seriously injured kid have been able to hold on until that little bastard June came back? But he couldn't lose his temper when he looked at the little girl. So, he waved his sleeves and disappeared without a trace. June Moxie and June Wui had strange expressions on their faces. If Yi Gohan wasn't still lying there like a corpse, the uncle and nephew would have laughed out loud. Sun Xiaomei's wisdom and experience couldn't be compared to the little girl's. Even though she didn't know the solitary eagle's background, the fact that the solitary eagle could extend the life of Yi Gohan with his xian qi was enough to prove that this person was brilliant. She wasn't scared to death by the little girl's ignorant words. She waited until she was sure that the solitary eagle didn't have any intention of getting angry. Then, she calmed down. If such an expert were to get angry, then the consequences would be quite serious. Emosia, quickly take a look at Xiao Yi. His situation is very bad. Junwei said. The young Master Jun nodded and sat down in front of the bed. To be honest, Jun Dashao had never liked Yi Gohan. Just like Yi Gohan didn't like the debauchee Jun. However, he had promised the third uncle that he would do his best to save him. Either he didn't save him, or he had to save him. This had always been the hitman's way of doing things. Moreover, Yi Gohan could be considered as a man of iron and steel. Saving him wouldn't be a loss. Chapter 267. Jun Emosia grabbed Yi Gohan's hand, and poured pure Xiantian spiritual energy into Yi Gohan's body. Yi Gohan's throat issued a weak cough, and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. It's difficult. Jun Moxie shook his head and frowned. He looked up at Jun Wui. It's very difficult. And the cost of treating him. I'm afraid it's going to be very, very big. Then, he turned to Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei and shouted, Haven't you two been scared enough? Hurry up and go over there and rest. The place he was talking about was naturally Guan Qing Han's small courtyard. Jun Wui understood the meaning of this, and tried to persuade them. Niece Xiao Yi, Niece Xiao Mei, go and play with your sister Qing Han. Don't worry, we'll be here. Everything will be fine. I've already sent people to inform your families, and someone will come to pick you up. Xiao Yi may be your elder, but he's still a man. Emosia won't be able to save him if you stay here. Dugu Xiaoyi pouted unhappily. Jun Emosia's words were reasonable, but the little girl felt that she was being treated as an outsider. So, she twisted her waist and pouted and refused to leave. But Sun Xiaomei persuaded and pulled her away. Sun Xiaomei was very astute. She had already sensed that this uncle and nephew had some secret to talk about, and it wasn't convenient for the two of them to be present. Did you really not find the princess? Jun Wui snorted and smiled. Would you have come back if you hadn't found her? I know you, brat. Either you don't agree or you do. It's fine as long as you know. Why did you say it out loud? Jun Moxie continued to transfer spiritual energy into Yi Gohan's body and slowly adjusted his bone position. He sighed helplessly. Third uncle, although Princess Rima hates me for what happened today, it's because I was unfilial in the past. No matter what, she can't be blamed. Yi Gohan is cold and aloof, but he can be considered an outstanding person and a good man. At this point, Jun Moxie's voice became heavy. Even so, helping them today might not be the right decision. He really shouldn't have saved her. Third uncle, how could you not know that our Jun family is already in a precarious situation? And now that there are more variables, we are in even more danger. Although I had already made arrangements and believed that they wouldn't suspect me for the time being, there would still be some clues to follow. These two girls, Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei, are already a huge loophole. Secondly, third uncle, you and I both know about Yi Gohan's situation. This person's identity is extremely sensitive. Not only is he the descendant of the rebellion, but he's also the protagonist of another matter. Jun Moxie looked at Jun Wui in a serious manner. Third uncle, you haven't considered this matter properly. This matter isn't a good thing for the Jun family, the others, or yourself. I've thought about these things that you've just said. Jun Wui looked at Jun Moxie with a deep gaze and said slowly in a dignified tone, you should know that there were 19 descendants of the family that grew up with me, your father, and your second uncle. But now, only me, Yi Gohan, the 3 Dugu brothers, and Murong Chenglong of the Murong family are left. Only the 6 of us are left. Jun Wui sighed. His Majesty will certainly feel uncomfortable if we save Yi Gohan today. But he will only feel uncomfortable. Because of this matter, he has been feeling uncomfortable for more than 10 years. So, what if he feels uncomfortable one more time? But if I change my mind and ignore this matter, how will I face the other 13 brothers in the underworld in the future? Even your grandfather won't forgive me. Even if your grandfather doesn't blame me, I won't be able to forgive myself. I still insist on saving him. Emosia, you must remember, our Jun family has never been a gentleman, but we will always distinguish between gratitude and grudges. A real man is born between heaven and earth. There are things that we shouldn't do, and things that we must do. We, the descendants of the Jun family, have our own pride and perseverance. This has always been the case. In those days, your great-grandfather, who was your grandfather's grandfather, was just an ordinary blacksmith. Before he died, he passed down the Jun family's ancestral teachings. Jun Wui's voice became solemn. What ancestral teachings? Jun Moxie asked curiously. If you have a bird between your legs, you must be a man. Indomitable spirit, go to hell. Jun Wui slowly recited these words. It must be said that the Jun family's ancestral teachings were quite crude. They were not polished at all. If you have a bird between your legs, you must be a man. Indomitable spirit, go to hell. Jun Moxie murmured these words twice. At first, he wanted to laugh, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that these words were to his taste. Good ancestral teachings. Jun Moxie cheered loudly. He was a little emotional and said, it seems that this ancestor, before he died, was a man. Yes, there are countless people in this world who have a bird between their legs, but there are very few who can be a man. Man? What is a man? Jun Wui looked at Jun Moxie like a hawk. A man is a husband. A real man. A man of iron bones and a loyal heart. A man of indomitable spirit. Jun Moxie laughed and said in a carefree manner. When he said these words, he felt that his heart was broadened. Carefree? Yes. Submissive, overcautious, cowardly, greedy for life. Such a person, even if he married 100 wives and gave birth to 800 sons, he still wouldn't be considered a real man. Jun Wui laughed heartily. A man of iron bones, a man of indomitable spirit. Well said. But what I admire the most is the last 4 words of this grandfather's teachings, F***ck off. Jun Emosia laughed heartily. This sentence is too much to my liking. It's simply a stroke of genius. To use these 4 words as an ancestral teaching, it is worthy of my Jun family's ancestor. Jun Wui smiled and said, that's right, these words seem vulgar and uncultured, but they contain an open-mindedness, arrogance, and carefreeness that is truly incisive. Do as I please, all the laws of the world, go to hell. Jun Moxie was happy in his heart. This ancestral teaching seemed to be tailor-made for me. You have your eyes on the 4th line, but I have my eyes on the 3rd line. Perhaps this is the difference between you and I. It has also caused us, uncle and nephew, to conduct ourselves in a completely different way. Jun Wui put away his smile and said slowly, Indomitable spirit. My understanding of these 4 words is, No matter what, to be worthy of your own conscience, you must first have a clear conscience, then you can be indomitable spirit. Life and death are not to be feared, glory and splendor are not worth mentioning. Wealth must be in the right way, and one must live life with a clear conscience. Jun Wu-yi resolutely said, "There is a sequence to the teachings of our ancestors. First be a good man. Then, be able to live up to your conscience. Only with these two prerequisites can you confidently say, 'Go to hell.'" After that, Jun Wu-yi smiled meaningfully. "Monsieur, do you understand the so-called ancestral teaching? Now, do you understand my choice?" "Yes, third uncle, I understand," Jun Moxie said solemnly. "First, you must be worthy of yourself, then you can do as you please." "That's right." Jun Wui was gratified. But he didn't realize that Jun Mosie's understanding was completely different from his own. In fact, it was a completely different matter. What Jun Mosie had said was to be able to face himself. This was completely different from what Jun Wu-yi had said when he said that he would live up to his own conscience. In fact, it could even be said that they were poles apart and couldn't be linked at all. Jun Moxie's art of unlocking heaven's fortune hadn't stopped supplying pure spiritual energy while the uncle and nephew were talking. So, Yi Gohan's breathing had stabilized under the infusion of spiritual energy. But, he was still unconscious. In fact, Jun Moxie could only do this much at the moment. He could only ensure that Yi Gohan's life wouldn't come to an end for the time being. But, he was temporarily powerless to make a full recovery, or even improve his condition. Someone came to report at this time. General Dugu has arrived with his bodyguards. Minister's son has also come to visit. Jun Wui hastily arranged for them to enter the room. Dugu Wudi and Minister's son had barely entered the room when they heard a servant report, "Princess Raimu has arrived." It turned out that Princess Raimu had immediately clamored to see Yi Gohan and her uncle Yi after Mr. Wen had rescued her back to the palace. Her attitude had been unusually fierce. Even the emperor had come to persuade her, but it had been of no use. Moreover, Princess Raimu's attitude had become even more resistant after the emperor had arrived. In fact, she had become somewhat cold. She had finally disregarded everything and wanted to leave the palace. The emperor had no choice but to agree. Princess Raimu had immediately inquired about Yi Gohan's whereabouts after leaving the palace. She had found out that Yi Gohan had been rescued by the Jun family's third master, Jun Wui. Princess Raimu had been overjoyed at the unexpected good news. So, she had immediately come to visit. Behind Princess Ling Meng were three old men who were gasping for breath. They were none other than Fang Huisheng and the other two, the three most famous divine doctors of the imperial palace. The guards who had followed behind them were carrying the three men's medicine boxes. They had rushed over in a hurry. "Uncle Yi." Princess Raimu had practically forced her way into the Jun family's residence. She had rushed inside. She hadn't paid any attention to anyone else. She had anxiously asked Jun Wui, "Third Uncle Jun, where is my Uncle Yi? Where is he?" At least she knows how to call someone. That's not too outrageous. Jun Wui smiled bitterly and shook his head. Princess Raimu felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Her vision had turned black, and she had almost fallen down. She then said in a trembling voice, "Could it be that Uncle Yi has? Your Royal Highness, please don't make wild guesses. Although Brother Ye's injuries are serious, his life is not in danger. I have already placed him in Mosie's courtyard. Sigh. I do not dare to hide this from you. Although Brother Ye's life is not in danger, his condition is very bad." Jun Wui thought for a moment. He had decided to tell Princess Raimu in advance so that she could be mentally prepared. The reason why Jun Wu-yi was able to speak in such a heartfelt manner was because Princess Ling Meng was the emperor's daughter. She was a dignified princess of a country. However, she was able to reveal her true feelings towards Yi Gohan. In fact, she was so concerned about Yi Gohan. Therefore, Yi Gohan's efforts were not in vain. This girl is also a person who values friendship and righteousness. Jun Wui was used to seeing the three princes fighting against each other. At this moment, when he saw Princess Raimu treating Yi Guhan with such sincerity, Jun Wui felt that this girl was not bad. In front of Yi Guhan's bed, Fang Huisheng and the other two carefully examined Yi Guhan. They stood up helplessly and shook their heads. They stuttered and said, "Your Royal Highness, please restrain your grief." During the battle, Mr. Yi not only suffered many serious injuries, but his external and internal injuries were also fatal. The most difficult thing is that Mr. Yi had lost too much blood. He had lost more than half of his body's blood. Once a person loses 1/3 of their blood, it is extremely difficult to save him. It is not something that can be saved with medicine. The reason why Mr. Yi is able to hold on until now without dying is because of the extremely pure Xian Qi instilled by two experts to prolong his life. However, that Xian Qi is after all an external thing. Being able to prolong his life is already the limit. I believe that there is no more chance for him to turn the situation around. Princess, please restrain your grief. Chapter 268. What? You're saying that Uncle Yi can't be saved? I don't believe it. Dr. Fang, please think of a way. Princess Raimu's body swayed as she heard the three miraculous doctors' conclusions. Her pretty face turned snow-white and she suddenly choked. Blood overflowed from her small mouth, and her eyes became extremely gloomy. But she didn't give up, and continued to plead with the head of the three miraculous doctors, Fang Huisheng. Princess, Mr. Yi has lost a lot of blood. His internal and external injuries are extremely serious. His ribs are broken, and his internal organs are damaged. Moreover, there are dozens of external injuries. To put it bluntly, Mr. Ye's body doesn't have the slightest bit of vitality. Fang Huisheng's tone was unusually heavy as he explained, with such injuries, even a deity wouldn't have any hope. It's already very rare for him to be able to hold on until now, and let the princess see him for the last time. Princess Raimu couldn't hold on any longer. She swayed a little and fell to the ground. Fang Huisheng and the other two shook their heads and sighed. They didn't dare to disturb the princess any further. They packed up their medicine boxes and left. Uncle Yi. Princess Ling Meng muttered absent-mindedly. Her face was so beautiful that it could cause the downfall of a nation. Her complexion was almost the same as Yi Guhan's as he lay on the bed. Dugu Wudi and the others couldn't bear to watch. They shook their heads and sighed. They didn't want to disturb the two of them for the last time. Instead, they left for the Jun family's hall. Only Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei stayed in the courtyard to accompany Princess Raimu. They were afraid that something might happen to her. But Sun Xiaomei hesitated for a while when she saw Princess Raimu's heartbroken expression. But she couldn't bear it anymore. So, she whispered in Princess Raimu's ear, "Jun Moxie can save Mr. Yi." Although Sun Xiaomei was not a beauty, she was a talented woman. She was really smart. When it came to wisdom, she was not inferior to Li Yuran. From the conversation between Jun Moxie and Jun Wui, she had already vaguely guessed that Jun Moxie should have the ability to save Yi Guhan. But for some reason, she was unwilling to do anything. Moreover, her identity as a princess was sensitive, which made it all the more. At this moment, seeing that Jun Moxie was not saying anything while Princess Raimu was grief-stricken, his heart softened and he reminded her. Princess Raimu had always believed in Sun Xiaomei's words. Although she didn't have confidence in Jun Moxie, she didn't doubt Sun Xiaomei. Moreover, for Princess Raimu at this moment, no matter how absurd it was the only life-saving straw. She would definitely grasp it. No matter how small the chance was, she would definitely try it. I must save Uncle Ye's life at all costs. Everyone had left, but Jun Xie didn't go anywhere. This small courtyard was his residence, and Yi Guhan had occupied his bed. So, how could he possibly move to another place to live? That was unreasonable. Jun Dashao crossed his legs and sat on the only armchair in the room. He closed his eyes and pondered. He had already promised the third uncle that he would treat Yi Guhan. So, he must treat him. However, this kid's injuries were very difficult to treat. So, how should I treat him? The loss of blood was the most troublesome part for the three great doctors. However, this wasn't a problem for Jun Mo-sia. After all, Jun Mo-sia had the wisdom of 2 lives. So, he could find someone with the right blood type. Then, he could transfuse his blood with the help of Jun Mo-sia's Xiantian aura. So, it wouldn't be a big problem. As for the internal and external injuries, Jun Moxie was confident that he could cure them. He had a lot of precious herbs, and he could nourish Yi Guhan's body. So, his life wouldn't be in danger even if he became a one-armed man. The most troublesome thing was Yi Guhan's ribs. The situation was so serious that it had never been seen or heard of before. He had broken 15 ribs. His chest had caved in. Some of the broken ribs hadn't just broken into 2 sections. Instead, they had broken into 3 or 4 sections. Then, 4 or 5 sections. This was the most difficult problem. And this problem was almost unsolvable. It wouldn't have been a big deal if it were a simple bone injury. It would have healed slowly as long as he could endure some pain. However, the internal and external injuries were being tormented at the moment. So, it was very likely that Yi Guhan's weak qi would have been enough to take his life. Yi Guhan only had a little bit of vitality left in his body. Moreover, it was something external. The great Master Falcon and the young Master Jun had instilled it into his body. So, he was barely able to prolong his life. However, it was impossible for him to sustain any large movement. However, Yi Guhan's bones would be completely deformed if he were to treat his external injuries and recuperate his vitality. Then, he would have enough vitality to bear the burden of the bone setting. Jun Moxie closed his eyes and frowned. He was thinking hard, but he didn't have the slightest clue. It's a pity that anesthetics don't exist in this world. It wouldn't be too difficult to treat Yi Guhan if anesthetics were available. Wait a minute, anesthetics? Jun Moxie suddenly became excited. He ferociously slapped his thigh. Jun Moxie opened his eyes wide in surprise. That was because he hadn't slapped his thigh a moment ago. In fact, he hadn't felt anything on his thigh. Where did I slap it? My hand clearly felt something. Moreover, that feeling was when Jun Mo-sia opened his eyes, he saw that Princess Lingmeng was covering her face with her hands. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at him. On her pretty face, a clear handprint could be seen slowly bulging up. This slap had landed squarely on Princess Raimu's face. It was an incomparably loud slap on her face. Crap! What are you doing? You came over like a ghost. Can't you make some noise? Don't you know that scaring people can scare people to death? Jun Dashao felt a headache coming on. He had been so focused on thinking about the problem that he hadn't noticed when Princess Raimu had come over. I slapped my thigh, and I actually slapped a beautiful woman's face. Moreover, this beautiful woman is a princess. This luck with women is really incurable. However, contrary to Jun Mo-sia's expectations, Princess Lingmeng was clearly in great pain. Her small face was twitching, but she didn't seem angry at all. Instead, she looked at him with pleading eyes. Then, she suddenly opened her mouth and said, "That? Jun. Third young master, I beg you, please save my Uncle Yi, can you?" Jun Moxie looked at her in astonishment. Then, he understood what was going on. His heart suddenly became angry. His sharp eyes quickly glanced at Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei. The 2 women suddenly shivered under his knife-like gaze. Dugu Xiaoyi was more or less fine. But Sun Xiaomei was the main planner of this incident. Her heart was trembling. She and Jun Dashao hadn't interacted much. But she was very clear about the debauchee Jun's character. He was definitely the kind of person who would hold grudges. So, wouldn't he take revenge on her for today's matter? She hoped that he wouldn't take revenge too ruthlessly since she was Fatty's fiancée. Save him? How can I save him? Even the three great masters couldn't do anything. So, how can a debauchee like me save him? What ability do I have to save him? Your Highness, you're begging the wrong person. Your joke isn't funny. It's not funny at all. Jun Moxie snorted. His mind had been filled with thoughts of how to save Yi Guhan before this. But now, the thought of giving up had appeared in his mind. I'll save him even if thousands of people try to stop me. I'll save him if I want to. But Princess Raimu doesn't know about my methods. But she's begging me. So, it's obvious that Dugu Xiaoyi or Sun Xiaomei told her that I have a method. The little girl shouldn't have leaked it. So, it's very likely that Sun Xiaomei was the one who instructed me to do this. Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel as if he had been betrayed. This kind of feeling made his good mood, which had already thought through everything, turn bad again in an instant. He was very angry. Betrayal was equivalent to betrayal in Jun Moxie's eyes. The thing that Jun Moxie couldn't accept the most in his life was being threatened. What Jun Moxie hated the most in his life was betrayal. Princess Raimu could hear the indifference in his voice. She couldn't help but feel desperate. She suddenly clenched her teeth. A determined look flashed in her eyes. She slowly stood up and looked at Jun Dashao. Then, she suddenly knelt down in front of him. She knelt down. I beg you. I beg you. Please save my Uncle Yi. I beg you, I beg you. Princess Ling Meng knelt on the ground. Her face was filled with desperation, but her expression was filled with endless sorrow. It's all because of my willfulness, all because of my ignorance. My Uncle Yi has suffered so many grievances and dangers for me. I have nothing to repay my Uncle Yi. But now that his life is in danger, I am willing to sacrifice everything in exchange for Uncle Ye's life. Jun Moxie, I'll kowtow to you. Princess Ling Meng banged her head heavily on the ground, causing a dong sound to echo out from the thick ground. Clearly, Princess Ling Meng had used a great deal of strength in this kowtow, and there was not the slightest bit of faking it. Dugu Xiaoyi and Sun Xiaomei were moved. As a princess, she was very noble. But now, for the sake of a guard, she knelt down and begged an outsider, a descendant of an official. Since ancient times, the imperial family had fought for power and profit. However, there were also many who valued friendship and righteousness. But to be able to do what Princess Ling Meng did, it was truly unique. The royal family had its own dignity. At this moment, Princess Ling Meng did not care about anything else. As a princess, she was kneeling in front of Jun Moxie. Everyone could see Princess Ling Meng's determination when she knelt. She didn't care about the cost. No matter how slim the chance was, she didn't care. Jun Moxie's expression was as calm as still water, but his heart was greatly shaken at this moment. He didn't expect Princess Raimu to do this for Yi Guhan. Dugu Xiaoyi rushed to him. Her eyes were filled with tears. Jerk, why are you hesitating? The princess knelt down and begged you. What else do you want? If you can help, do it. Don't tell me you want us to kneel down as well? Jun Moxie's face was cold as he extended his hand and pushed Dugu Xiaoyi to the side. He then stood up and looked coldly at Princess Ling Meng. Without the slightest trace of emotion, he said, I'm sorry, I'm really powerless. Chapter 269. Even if it was not for any other reason, she had overlooked Jun Moxie's character. He was not just a petty person. This person never needed others to tell him what to do, no one was an exception. He always had his own way of doing things. What she had done seemed to be helping Princess Raimu and giving her hope, but she had angered Jun Moxie, which was tantamount to permanently destroying all hope of saving Yi Guhan. Moreover, the sensitive identity of Princess Raimu and Yi Guhan, coupled with the June family's current situation, were the main reasons why June Moxie did not act now. Why? What do you want me to do for you to agree? What do you want me to do? Say it. I'll agree to anything, as long as you say it. Princess Raimu knelt on the ground in despair. Her eyes were empty, but she still held on to the last bit of hope and asked. It doesn't matter what condition it is, it's meaningless, because I don't trust you. June Emosia looked up at the sky and sighed deeply. Then, he resolutely said, Your Highness, I really want to save him. But you also know that our June family is in a precarious situation right now. It would not be an exaggeration to say that we are in a precarious situation. Besides, to be able to cure a patient that even the 3 great doctors couldn't treat, what does it mean? What does it mean? June Moxie took a deep breath. For now, I'm only suspected and suspected, but if I really save Yi Gohan, then it will be true. Your Highness, besides, that Yi Gohan is the person that His Majesty avoids the most. Saving him is tantamount to offending His Majesty. This matter concerns the lives of thousands of people in the June family, as well as the lives of tens of thousands of people in the June family faction. If by any chance, Your Highness, do you think I would agree to bet Yi Gohan's life? If it were you, would you be willing to do it? How can I trust you? The royal family has never had any relative. Don't you know that, Princess? June Moxie said heavily. I can swear to keep it a secret. You tell me, how can you trust me? How could he do that? Princess Raimu lowered her head sadly. She knew that the oath was not binding, but she really didn't know how to change it. She was speechless for a moment. Dugu Xiaoyi bit her lips. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't. Sun Xiaomei sighed in her heart. June Sunxiao's words made a lot of sense. At this time, even if it was her, she had to let it go. Her previous actions were too childish and unwise. The current emperor was a man of great talent and bold vision, but his only undeniable flaw was that he was overly suspicious. As she was thinking, she saw Princess Raimu stand up. Her delicate body turned to another direction and knelt down again. She bit her lips a few times, and a stream of fresh blood flowed down from the corner of her mouth. The blood dripped on the ground, and it was extremely beautiful. She hesitated for a while, and finally made up her mind. She raised her left hand in front of her chest and said softly, but firmly, The heavens above, the earth below, the heavens and the earth, the ancestors, listen to my oath. I, Yang Raimu, hereby swear. She paused for a while, and her pretty face twisted. Finally, she said loudly, If June Moxie can save my Uncle Ye's life, and let him escape from death, I, Raimu, will immediately return to the palace and beg my father to marry me to June Moxie at all costs. I will be his wife or concubine, and I will obey him without a word of complaint. In this life, I will be the most loyal woman to June Moxie. I will keep my mouth shut about my husband's affairs, and not a single word of it will be leaked. If I break this oath, my entire family, young and old, will die a horrible death. My ancestors will not rest in peace. Raimu will also suffer the punishment of being hacked into pieces and struck by lightning, and will never be able to reincarnate. I hereby swear this oath, and the heavens and the gods will bear witness. When she finished speaking, Princess Raimu flipped her hand, and a small flying dagger appeared in her hand. It shone with a cold light, and she slashed her arm with lightning speed. Blood spurted out like a fountain, but she did not even frown. Using her own blood, she drew a circle in front of her, and then she kowtowed. Right in the middle of the circle of blood, a head of silky hair, like water, spread out on the ground. She did not raise her head for a long time, with the heavens and the earth as the witness, and the gods as the witness. In the name of the ancestors, and with the blood of the soul, this oath is made. This was the most sacred and most vicious oath in the Xian continent. No one would dare to go back on this oath, and Princess Raimu kowtowed right in the middle of the circle of blood. The oath was made. In this life, it could not be changed. Duguxiaoyi, ah! Her eyes widened as she covered her mouth with her small hands. Her eyes were quickly filled with tears. Princess Raimu slowly stood up. Her face was already crisscrossed with tears, but she did not cry out. Her tearful eyes stared at June Moxie. She enunciated each word clearly. June Moxie, do you believe me now? June Emosia was tongue-tied, and couldn't say anything. June Dashao would never have imagined that Princess Raimu would make such an oath. How could he say that? Previously, June Moxie had already decided to save Yigohan. It was only because there were some key issues that were difficult to deal with. Coupled with the sudden arrival of Princess Raimu, and her special identity, June Moxie was unable to act. Otherwise, as long as he had secretly saved Yi Guhan, and then casually pushed the blame onto some mysterious person who didn't exist, it wouldn't have been a big hindrance even if some people had suspected it. However, he had never expected that Princess Ling Meng, whom he had rescued with great difficulty, would return so quickly. Moreover, the most damning thing was that 3 imperial physicians had followed her. These 3 divine physicians could represent the highest level of medical expertise in the Tianxiang Empire. With so many eyes, Jun Emosie's original plan was foiled on the spot. Even if he could save him, he could not save him now. Otherwise, if Raimu were to suddenly leak the news to the Emperor's ears, and let him know that the Jun family's 3rd young master had such an ability to bring a dead person back to life, wouldn't that be terrible? First of all, grandfather had been guilty of deceiving the Emperor all these years. Then, there was the suspicion of 3rd uncle's injury. Following these clues, the matter of the aristocratic hall was also a logical conclusion. No matter how many heads the Jun family had, it would not be enough to chop off. Therefore, June Moxie had resolutely refused to treat Yigohan. But Princess Raimu had unexpectedly made such an oath in order to gain June Moxie's trust. The moment this oath was made, both she and June Emosia were forced to a point where there was no turning back. Princess Raimu's entire body was trembling. Her eyes were fierce as she looked at June Moxie. She knew that June Moxie had been interested in her for several years. He had been pestering her for the past few years. He had even begged June Zhantian to propose marriage to her imperial father. But she had refused. Moreover, her imperial father was no longer optimistic about the June family. So, this matter had eventually fallen through. Princess Raimu's mind was in a daze at this time. So, she hadn't carefully analyzed June Dashao's words. She had simply thought that June Moxie's words of "I don't believe" were obviously a disguised form of this condition. This was a veiled expression of this debauchee's true purpose. "I'm afraid that this brat won't save Uncle Yi if I don't agree to this condition. Do I really have to watch Uncle Yi pass away in front of me?" Princess Raimu couldn't do it. Therefore, she had hesitated for a long time. But she had finally decided to agree. "So, what if I sacrifice the rest of my life's happiness as long as Uncle Yi survives? Moreover, my future marriage will only be a means for my imperial father to draw the ministers to his side. Who knows what my future husband will be like? He may not be better than June Moxie. Uncle Yi can disregard his life and death for me. So, can't I do something for him?" Therefore, Princess Raimu had made such a resolute decision. The flying knife was still in her hand. Her blood was still on it. But Princess Raimu's heart was already ice-cold. What hope is there in this situation? What longing is there? It's just a dream. Princess Raimu stared at June Moxie. June Moxie also stared at her. His heart was also in a mess. Sun Xiaomei had seen through their minds. She was so shocked that she couldn't say a word. Suddenly, Dugu Xiaoyi burst into tears in the silence. She cried so sadly, "Boo-hoo! Brother Emosia, that's mine. I saw him first. Boo-hoo, you want to take him away with a vow?" "No. Absolutely not. We didn't discuss this with each other. You are a princess, so what?" The more Dugu thought about it, the more wrong she felt. The more she thought about it, the sadder and sadder she felt. The two people didn't talk anymore. They were looking at each other lovingly. She couldn't help crying. Actually, Dugu was dazzled. Like Princess Raimu, she was just imagining it. Jun Emosia was startled, but he also cut a sorry figure. He was angry that he had been forced onto the stage. Princess Ling Meng, on the other hand, had a solemn and stirring expression of sacrifice and dedication. This and being affectionate were two completely different things. Okay. I promise you. I'll save him. Jun Moxie took a deep breath. But I won't accept your vow. You and I are not a good match. Besides, it's ridiculous to talk about marriage like this. Yigohan can only recover slowly in my place for a long time. I can't guarantee to what extent he can recover. Do you understand what I mean? Jun Moxie gave her a warning look. If I can save him, I can kill him. Besides, what kind of stupid oath did you make? Even if you want to make an oath, you only need to make a blood oath that you will never reveal it. My original intention was just to use your mouth to fabricate a peerless expert who descended from the sky and saved your guardian Yi. As long as this matter can be smoothed over, there is no need for any bullsh *t oath of, no matter if I am a wife or a concubine, I will obey. Damn, even if you really want to marry me, I don't want to marry you. I'm not mentally prepared. Don't be fooled by your beauty. Can you be stronger than a little girl? Can you be stronger than that little girl in Silver City? Besides, no matter what kind of woman she is, I can order her around even if I cover her head. What's the use of being beautiful? However, the fact that Princess Raimu was willing to make such a big sacrifice for Yigohan had deeply shocked Jun Moxie. If he was in Princess Raimu's shoes, Jun Moxie could say with certainty that he would never be able to do it. The blood vow has been made. Even if you don't accept it, you can't change it. This is a fact. Princess Raimu was delighted when she heard that he was willing to save Yigohan. Then she said Lingling, I only hope that Uncle Yi will never know the truth of this matter. Chapter 270. Yigohan's injury is too serious. Even if I try my best, I'm not sure that I can cure him completely. Also, even if his injury recovers, his right hand is broken, and it will be difficult for him to wield a sword again. His kung fu will also be reduced by 70 to 80%. So, in order to avoid some trouble, you should announce to the public that Yigohan has passed away due to his serious injury. Even if you want to see him in the future, you have to inform me in advance so that I can make arrangements. You have no objections, right? Princess Raimu bit her lips and nodded. She naturally knew what Jun Moxie meant by in order to avoid some trouble. After all, there were some things that both of them had a tacit understanding about. Princess Ling Meng sighed when she saw Dugu Xiaoyi crying her heart out. She walked over, took out a handkerchief, and gently wiped her tears. Then, she said in a desolate voice, Silly sister, I won't fight with you. Sigh. Is it really us sisters, who have such a hard life? Is it worth it for you to do this? She wanted to say this foppish son, but when she thought of her oath, she didn't say it. Dugu Xiaoyi stopped crying and widened her teary eyes. Really? Then you just… Of course it's true. I didn't have a choice just now. Princess Raimu smiled gently. At this moment, this girl who was only a little older than Dugu Xiaoyi seemed to have grown up a lot. She said, At most, after you're married, I'll ask my father to grant you a marriage to fulfill this promise. It's just a promise. I'll just take the oath. Is that not enough? Dugu Xiaoyi immediately blushed, but her tears turned into a smile. She snorted twice and said, You're older than me. You go first. Although she had said this, anyone could see that this little girl's words were insincere. Jun Moxie walked over and sat next to Yigon. When he heard these two sentences, he almost fell to the ground. Nothing had been set in stone yet, so what were these two women talking about? I haven't even planned to find a wife yet, and there are actually 2 people rushing to marry me? We don't have any plans in this regard right now. Pure energy seeped into Yi Gohan's body. Jun Moxie's expression was cold as he closed his eyes slightly. Lengling said, Miss Sun. Sun Xiaomei apologized in a low voice. You don't have to say anything, I know what you want to say. I won't do it again. I'm sorry. Considering that you're Fatty's fiancé and also my little girl's sister, I'll let it go this time. But if there's a next time, I'll kill you. What I hate the most is betrayal. Jun Moxie rolled his eyelids and a dense, sharp killing intent flashed through his eyes. The thick killing intent gushed out, and the 3 women instantly felt their bodies turn cold. Jun Moxie's words were full of killing decisiveness. No one would doubt it, and no one could provoke him. If he said he would do it, he would definitely do it. Sun Xiaomei was silent. She knew that Jun Moxie wasn't joking with her, not at all. Just now, Jun Moxie and Jun Wui talked in front of her and Duguxiaoi, and they didn't hide anything. This meant that he trusted the 2 of them, but she didn't get his consent and revealed this matter to Raimu. If it was called betrayal, it might be too harsh, but strictly speaking, it wasn't too much to say that it was betrayal. After all, no matter what position or reason she had, this fact couldn't be changed. Did she still ignore Jun Moxie's character? This young man's character was a kind of, those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. Suddenly, Sun Xiaomei's body shook, and she was shocked by the words that came to her mind. Jun Moxie, are you that kind of person? Princess Raimu's eyes widened in surprise. This Jun Moxie, when did he have such a strong aura? Could it be that he's really different from before? Could it be that this is the reason why Duguxiaoi fell in love with him? Princess Raimu was still worried, and she tiptoed closer to the bed. Looking at Yi Gohan's thin and pale face, she couldn't help but feel her heart ache, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Xiao-yi. Jun Moxie closed his eyes and circulated his energy with all his might. What's the matter? Duguxiaoi was a cheerful person, and no matter what kind of emotions she had, they came and went quickly. At this moment, she had already dried her tears, and she felt embarrassed for crying out loud. She jumped up as soon as she heard Jun Moxie's call. Tell the 3rd uncle to send someone to the aristocratic hall and bring back some herbs. Jun Moxie casually named a few herbs and said, the sooner the better, I have a great use for them. Duguxiaoi nodded, and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Princess Raimu moved very close to Jun Moxie. This was the first time in her life that she had been so close to Jun Dashao. She looked at him with his eyes closed, and his complexion was indescribably cold. It seemed as if he was completely focused, and looked down on all living beings in the world. She couldn't help but feel moved in her heart. At this moment, Princess Raimu suddenly felt a faint sense of familiarity in her heart. Yes, it was a very familiar feeling. Moreover, it was intimate and safe. This feeling was incomparably warm and comfortable. Where had I felt this before? Why did I feel this warm feeling? Princess Raimu frowned and pondered hard. Suddenly, a light flashed in her mind. Of this aura, why is it so familiar? Princess Raimu couldn't help but move closer to Jun Moxie. The closer she got, the clearer that feeling became in her heart. It seemed as if she was slowly reminding herself of something, but she couldn't figure out what it was. She silently sat on one side and didn't make a sound. Sun Xiaomei sat beside her, and had a vexed expression on her face. Sister Xiaomei, why did you go to the Jun family? Princess Raimu suddenly thought of this matter, and couldn't help but ask. She felt bitter in her heart. The blood oath had already been sworn. So, why was she still thinking about it? Xiao Bai led the 3rd uncle and Jun Moxie there after you were captured. Sun Xiaomei gave a simple explanation. Then, the 3rd uncle took us and Uncle Yi back to the Jun family. Then, Jun Sunxiao went alone to inquire about you. What? Jun Moxie went alone to inquire about me? Princess Raimu suddenly lost her self-control and asked loudly. She stood up with a look of shock on her face. She had been thinking about this matter for a long time, but it seemed as if the sun had suddenly cracked open the dark clouds in the sky. And her mind had suddenly become clear. A mysterious expert had rushed out of the cave with her in his arms. In fact, it was that mysterious knife-throwing expert who had been protecting her all this time. And what she had felt in that man's arms was very similar to what she had felt when she was next to June Moxie. Could it be? But how is this possible? Princess Raimu shook her head fiercely. It seemed as if she wanted to get rid of this ridiculous thought. But her heart became more and more certain, and the two figures gradually began to overlap in her mind. She recalled that June Moxie had also been present when she had been assassinated, and he had suddenly disappeared. Is it really him? Princess Raimu's heart thumped wildly. She looked at June Moxie in amazement. Suddenly, a feeling emerged in her heart for the first time. He is actually very handsome, she suddenly blushed. Right at this moment, Dugu Xiaoyi came bouncing in after completing her task. The little girl finally came back to her senses. She was extremely happy. He called my name, Xiao-Yi, just now. It sounds so nice. I'll let him call me that a few more times in the future. Hee. Little sister Xiao-Yi. Princess Raimu tried her best to restrain the excitement in her heart. She pretended to be calm and said, I heard that June Sunshao had forged a treasured saber for you? It's the one that you showed off the last time. It said that it has a nice name. It's called the best saber of red sleeves? Can I have a look at it? The last time I said that I wanted to show it to you, you were so dismissive. But this time, you want to show it to me. All right, I'll show it to you, Dugu Xiaoyi mumbled. But she still rolled up her sleeves and untied the thin saber blade. June Moxie almost fainted when he caught a glimpse of it. Dugu Xiaoyi, I gave you this saber for you to slash people. It's not for you to use as an arm guard. What a waste of God's gift. June Moxie growled. He was extremely angry. This little girl has actually tied the saber tightly to my arm. It took me quite a while to untie it. How is this different from an arm guard? If it's tied like this, I'm afraid that the battle will be over by the time I pull out the saber. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She hummed a few times and said bashfully, This is the token that you gave me. I'm not willing to use it. Why are you still blaming me? As she spoke, she lowered her head as if her face was on fire. She pinched the corner of her clothes and asked shyly, My jade pendant, you're still wearing it, aren't you? Princess Ling Meng had made a blood oath. Admittedly, it was not from her own heart. But the little girl had already felt a great threat from Princess Ling Meng. She felt that her position was in a precarious position. So, when June Moxie asked her about it, she decided to ignore her shyness and use the words keepsake. She meant to tell Princess Raimu, whether you're willing or not, I'm still ahead of you. Look, we even have a token of love. When it comes to this, even if we're good sisters, I can't back down. Dugu Xiaoyi, will fight for my love till the end. If you piss me off, I'll also make a blood oath. You didn't do it willingly, but I did. Who's afraid of who? Jade pendant? Token? June Moxie was stunned. Where did this come from? That jade pendant. I seem to have put it aside after I accepted it. I can't remember where I put it now. Princess Ling Meng did not pay any attention to Dugu Xiaoyi's words. Her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes shone with a strange light of surprise. She received the treasured blade, and with a single glance, she was able to determine one thing. This blade and the flying dagger in her bosom were clearly made by the same person. Whether it was the craftsmanship of the maker, the patterns on the saber, or the uniqueness of the casting of the saber, as well as the degree of sharpness, everything was clear. The body of the saber was light and small. It was easy to hold, hack, and stab, but it would never hurt the hand. The tip, the edge, the back, the edge, the body, the handle, and the hanger. Every aspect of the saber, including the curve of the saber, was well-tempered and smooth. It was obvious that the person who cast this saber had spent a lot of effort on it. Apart from that, the saber was slightly shorter. It was obvious that the size of the material used to cast this saber had determined that it was made for a woman. The entire saber was shining and the patterns of the clouds were twinkling like the stars in the night sky. It was also like the Milky Way had fallen from the sky and landed on the saber. The entire saber was a flowing river of light. Chapter 271. Nice saber. Princess Raimu looked at it enviously, unable to put it down. Now, in her heart, she had basically decided on one thing. However, she was not ready to reveal this matter. Because now, she felt that June Moxie's previous pestering, acting like a spoiled brat, and showing off his hooligan methods, was probably just a cover-up? Otherwise, just his earth-shattering medical skills alone would be enough to set off a huge uproar in the capital city, not to mention his world-shocking Xian-Qi, his chivalrous character, and his courageous heart. However, because of his family's reasons, this young man, who should have stood at the peak and enjoyed the worship and respect of the public, would rather sully himself than what he said before was all true. He really did not have any intention of coveting me. Perhaps we are really not compatible, but it's not that he is not worthy of me, it's that I am not worthy of him. These years, it has been really hard on him. A peerless youth who possessed such a peerless skill, who was proud and arrogant, had no choice but to live under the scorn of the crowd. He even had to put on an extremely vile performance, as if he couldn't be trained. What a great torture this was! How broad-minded and open-minded one must be to be able to face all of this calmly. Who doesn't want to be admired by the public? Who doesn't want to be worshipped by the public? Who doesn't want to step on the peak? But June Moxie, who had all these conditions, had to swallow the humiliation. Princess Raimu suddenly felt a sour feeling in her heart. He's only about the same age as me, but the things he's experienced are several times, or even dozens of times more than me. Moreover, he's done a good deed without leaving his name, and he doesn't ask for anything in return. He'd rather endure the scornful looks of the people he saved. This kind of breadth of mind, how could a mere person like Li Yuan compare? In an instant, the image of June Moxie in Princess Raimu's heart suddenly changed from a bastard who did all kinds of evil to a lofty and glorious image. It was as if she had suddenly risen from the 18th level of hell to above the 33rd level. Moreover, it happened in the blink of an eye. Princess Raimu suddenly felt that the blood oath she made just now wasn't that unacceptable. Moreover, she felt a little delighted. Unfortunately, June Xie didn't know about these things. Otherwise, he would have burst into tears, and would have laughed 3 times. Then, he would have lamented like a psychopath. Heaven! Earth! What kind of princess is this? How can her imagination be so rich? Even I don't dare to dream like this. The former Xie and this young master's scoundrel didn't disguise themselves at all. The former Xie was indeed a typical prodigal and had absolutely no image to speak of. As for this young master, he did as he pleased and did not care about what others thought of him. In summary, Princess Ling Meng's wishful thinking was the result of June Xie's wishful thinking. June Xie's image as a debauchee had been infinitely magnified. In fact, it had been perfected to the extreme. Dugu Xiaoyi saw that Princess Raimu was holding her passion knife in a daze. She looked as if she couldn't bear to part with it. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart suddenly tightened. Humph! I won't give this knife to you no matter what. Sisters don't have feelings for each other. She pouted and walked over. Sister Meng, have you seen enough? It's just a knife, that's all. What's so special about it? Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the saber. Then, he narrowed his eyes and smiled proudly. This saber isn't very strange. But I've heard my brother Emosie say that it's unique in terms of material and style. Unique? I don't think so, right? Princess Raimu didn't know why, but she suddenly felt very uncomfortable as she looked at Duguxiao's proud expression. She couldn't help but retort sarcastically, I have several knives like this one. It's just that the style is a little small. You have several? I don't believe it. The big bad guy said that I'm the only one he's made for. Duguxiao exclaimed. Her pretty big eyes opened wide. How is that possible? Why is it impossible? Isn't it just a few knives? Princess Raimu smiled mysteriously. Won't you know when you have time to take a look? Princess Raimu could only talk about it. She didn't know that although she had a few knives made by Jun Dashao, they were all obtained by coincidence. That one was not a gift from Jun Dashao, let alone a specially made one. Now, she didn't dare to take out the knife. Jun Moxie was still present at the moment. It seemed that he didn't care much about her. If she flaunted it, it would definitely make him unhappy. This was secondary. If he exposed her on the spot, wouldn't she lose face in front of her two sisters? I must see Sister Raimu's treasure when I have time. Duguxiao pouted and her eyes flashed with a sharp light. Princess Raimu looked at each other with a smile. Both of them were smiling like flowers. However, when their eyes met, they suddenly felt a strong hostility. This kind of willpower had obviously surpassed the category of a young girl. It had already risen to the level of a woman. A woman would definitely do anything to protect her love and status. Compared to this, sisterly love seemed to be nothing. This kind of strong hostility and jealousy between women could even be felt by Sun Xiaomei at the side. At this moment, even though Sun Xiaomei was extremely intelligent, she couldn't help but open her mouth in surprise. It was not surprising that Duguxiao was infatuated with Master Jun Sunshao. However, this girl Raimu's change in attitude was too huge. This couldn't be explained no matter what. Although Princess Raimu made a blood oath that she wouldn't marry anyone except Jun Moxie, it was absolutely because she was forced by the situation. She didn't want to do it at all. According to her understanding of her, Princess Raimu had never liked Jun Moxie. It could even be said that she hated him deeply. How could it be that in just a moment, with just a blink of an eye, the two of them actually started to fight for a man's affection? And the smell of gunpowder was so strong. They completely disregarded the deep sisterly love. What was going on? Inexplicable, really inexplicable. Sun Xiaomei felt that her big brain, which had always been very useful, was a bit short-circuited today. Finally, Jun Moxie breathed a long sigh of relief and loosened his hands that were grabbing Yigohan's wrist. After such a long time, regardless of the consequences and the massive output of spiritual qi, Jun Moxie's injury finally stabilized. The Xian qi in Yigohan's body had been completely expelled by Jun Moxie. Instead, it had been replaced by 100% thick spiritual qi. Moreover, Jun Moxie had carefully wrapped his broken bones with spiritual qi. As long as he didn't deliberately move his body or move his broken bones, there wouldn't be any problems in the short term. Jun Moxie opened his eyes in exhaustion. He looked at the three girls in front of him and sighed in a dejected manner. He didn't want to talk. In the eyes of the hitman, a woman could be compared to 1,000 ducks. In fact, he could talk until he fainted. As for three women together, this was a very terrifying matter, especially when there was only one man on the opposite side. That man's fate would be very miserable. How is it? Princess Raimu moved forward with a somewhat flattering expression on her face. How is it? Duguxiao's small head drilled into the front of Jun Moxie's nose. Her thin eyebrows were constantly twitching. Jun Moxie could even feel her thin breathing. It was unexpectedly carrying a hint of sweetness. Are you very tired? Miss Sun didn't dare to join in the fun. Instead, she sat on the side and interjected a few words. The three women asked questions at the same time. Jun Dashao was so tired that he didn't even want to speak. So, He weakly sighed from his throat. He thought for a moment, but still felt that he had something to say. So, he opened his eyes and looked at the three girls in front of him. He tried hard to keep a straight face. It was like a block of ice that would never melt. His cold eyes swept over the three women. They were somewhat apprehensive. Some of them were trembling. They didn't know why, but they felt as if they had done something shameful. Even the little girl was no exception. Women, women! June Moxie's mouth twitched. He raised his hand and rubbed his temples with great effort. His face was full of annoyance. I originally didn't want to talk nonsense with you. But now that I think about it, it's actually somewhat necessary. Otherwise, sooner or later, this young master will be dragged to death by you guys. Ah! The three women were shocked at the same time. They looked at each other and scratched their heads in confusion. First of all, it's you. You're outrageously wrong. June Moxie pointed at Princess Raimu without any trace of politeness. Take today's incident as an example. Those were completely unnecessary sacrifices. You just made something out of nothing. Yigohan shouldn't have been so heavily injured. He shouldn't have been disabled. He even had the chance to escape unscathed. But because of your stupidity, he ended up like this today. You knelt down to seek medical treatment for your Uncle Yi. You even sacrificed yourself to seek medical treatment. It seems very touching, but I still feel wronged for Yigohan. His tragic situation today is really not worth it. It's too suffocating. I also heard a little about today's incident from their mouths. Your Highness, Princess Raimu, you're already a gold xian expert. In the eyes of ordinary people, you can be considered as an expert. Even if you can't win against an assassination or a kidnapping, you can still run away, right? Yigohan has already blocked all the enemies for you. And the incident happened not far from the Imperial City. Why didn't you run away? Why did you have to show that you care about him? Why did you cry? It's those unrealistic things that caused Yigohan to end up like this. At the moment when the incident happened, the only thing you should have done was to seize the time to run away. Quickly run away. The faster you run, the further you run. Then Yigohan will be more at ease. You shouldn't have been thinking about Yigohan's safety at that time. Or, you shouldn't have left Uncle Yi behind and run away by yourself. You should have been thinking about your own safety. Because Yigohan did it for you. As long as you were safe, it wouldn't have been difficult for Yigohan to escape. Even if he couldn't escape unscathed, he wouldn't have been injured to this extent. But, did you do that? You didn't. You only knew how to turn back. Yigohan was seriously injured and on the verge of death. But, you didn't manage to run more than 300 feet. Xiao Yi and Miss Sun weren't pulling you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to run that far. Is your brain filled with bean curd? What are you thinking? June Moxie scolded her without holding back. He reprimanded her mercilessly. Princess Raimu's eyes reddened. She was about to cry. Chapter 272. Princess Raimu's body trembles. She is scared by his fierce expression and eyes. She doesn't dare to cry. Especially after Yigohan was seriously injured. You didn't even run away. You're really good and powerful. You're really loyal. You're willing to do everything for your Uncle Yi. Very good, very touching. I really want to say that I admire you. June Moxie grits his teeth and nods fiercely. Suddenly he roars. But have you ever thought that you have two good sisters by your side? You're so loyal that you won't run away no matter what. Will they abandon you and run away alone? You're directly harming them, killing them. If today's matter wasn't for kidnapping but for assassination, the three of you would have become a pile of dead meat now. What's the use of being beautiful? The enemy's target is you. It's not a loss for you to die. But you've implicated two innocent sisters. If something bad happens to them, will you feel guilty? But Princess Raimu suddenly feels a little scared and ashamed. She doesn't dare to look at June Moxie's eyes. She doesn't even dare to look at the two sisters next to her. But what? June Moxie's voice is stern, but Yi Gohan was already lying on the ground. Are you worried about him? That's even more shameful logic. If Yi Gohan hadn't died, then he would have kept you safe. But if Yi Gohan had died, then he would have died to protect you. So, he would have died a worthy death. He used his life to cover your escape. That's the price of his death. But you didn't run away. Instead, you didn't move. You made his death completely meaningless. It was no longer of any use. He gave up his life to exchange for a chance, but you let it go. Even if he dies, he won't be able to rest in peace. Stupid woman! When will your brain, which is stuffed with tofu dregs, be enlightened? Huh! You're really stupid. With this kind of brain, you actually have the nerve to boast that you're exceptionally intelligent. You look down on this, you look down on that, you spit on that. June Moxie was a little tired from scolding people. He had to admit that scolding a princess with such harsh words and stern countenance gave him a sense of accomplishment. It was so satisfying. He had avenged himself for being ignored before. And you? Pointing at Dugu Xiaoyi, he said, is it fun to tie a knife to your arm when you have nothing better to do? Why don't you tie it to your crotch? Don't you know that the saber technique needs to be paired with your saber in order to bring out its greatest power? What was the use of tying it to his body? Did your head get kicked by a donkey too? Panting heavily, June Moxie continued to scold. Can't bear to? What was there to be reluctant about? Saber. What is it used for? The saber was not for ornamentation, nor was it for decoration. The existence of a saber was to behead people, chop people, and kill people. What's the use of tying it to your arm? I worked so hard to forge a saber for you. Was it just for you to tie it to your arm and use your stinky sweat to rot it every day? Do you know how much effort, energy, and time I spent to forge this saber? What a waste. Stupid. You're all so hopelessly stupid. Her brain is full of tofu dregs. Your brain must be flooded with water. There's a limit to how strong you are. June Moxie pointed at the tip of Dugu Xiaoyi's nose with his finger. His saliva almost sprayed on her face. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned pale. She tried her best to lean back to avoid his saliva. Moreover, you weren't their target at that time. Princess Raimu definitely couldn't escape. Why didn't the two of you run for reinforcements? Why did you foolishly rush towards them? They were Tian Xian's elites. Do you know what Tian Xian is? It's like a beggar telling the emperor that he wants to rebel. It's the same logic. He can crush your tiny body into pieces with just one finger. No. Not a single bit of you will be left. Saying that you're a mantis trying to stop a chariot or an ant trying to shake a tree is a compliment. You're simply humiliating Tian Xian's elites. You're the second stupid woman. June Moxie took a deep breath and concluded. And you? Do you think you're very smart? June Moxie didn't let go of Sun Xiaomei. She doesn't understand. Are you stupid too? You know you're running for your life. Why are you running on the street? Are you running for your life? I think it's more like taking a stroll. What kind of idiot would come up with such a stupid escape route? Can't you take a few more detours? There are houses on both sides. Breaking into a few houses and exiting through the front door and the back door would be much safer, right? There was actually a road that led straight to the top, and they were running wildly on it. Do you think you can outrun an expert like Tian Xian with your speed? I know you don't have a good appearance. That's why you have a unique way of doing things. You're able to see through people and see through problems and things. That's why you're very arrogant in this aspect. Arrogant my ass. What's the use of that? You can't even see through yourself. No matter how accurate you see through others, it's all fake. Do you understand? The little lass doesn't understand worldly affairs. The princess's mind is clouded. You're the only one who understands. Can't you just knock the princess out and bring her away? I believe that if you knock that stupid woman out earlier, you'll definitely be able to escape safely. Even Yi Guhan would have a chance to escape. Do you think I'm right? If you don't understand yourself, don't think of understanding anyone. June Moxie slammed the table. Also, don't think that you're so smart that you can see through everyone's thoughts. You think that you've grasped men's psychology and women's weaknesses. Let me tell you. Whether it's a man or a woman, everyone has their own thoughts. No one would be willing to be controlled by others. Don't use your pitiful intelligence to measure others. From what I can see, you're still far from it. A single wrong decision is enough to kill someone. Today, Yi Guhan is the best example. It doesn't matter if you're stupid. But please don't implicate others. Especially your own relatives. June Moxie roared. June Moxie rained curses down on them. His saliva splattered all over the place. He scolded the princess and the two ladies until they couldn't raise their heads. It was as if he was scolding his grandchildren. But you've said it yourself. We're only gold Xian experts. There's still an unreachable distance between us and Tian Xian. Strength is the most important factor in everything. What can we do? Sun Xiaomei snorted. She was a little dissatisfied that he was pointing at her nose and scolding her. So, she straightened her neck and retorted. This girl is different from the princess and the little girl. She's also an extremely arrogant character. Does strength fall from the sky? June Moxie snorted. Dressing up every day can cultivate tyrannical strength? Treating yourself as a flower vase every day? Treating yourself as an object of protection? How can you cultivate peerless martial arts? If you want to become a true master, a true powerhouse, do you know how much you have to pay? That's something that you ladies can't even imagine. Even the ordinary comprehension of martial arts requires you to use your own life and soul to fight for it. June Moxie laughed. You're so young, but you've already reached the Gold Xian realm. It can be said that you're the geniuses of the younger generation. Many people have said that reaching the Gold Xian realm at such a young age is very rare and precious. Even I have to admit this. But, practicing Xian cultivation is something that goes against the heavens. It's a waste of time, energy, and resources. It's the most contrary to the common customs of the world. But you've also reached the prime years of a woman's life. There have always been many geniuses among women. But those who are able to abandon their beauty and youth to become peerless experts are few and far between since the ancient times. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because I hope that you won't be as stupid as you were today. Because your strength is too low, I believe that something like today's will happen again in the future. And I also believe that no one is willing to become the second Yi Guhan. Your sacrifice is worthless. Do you understand? June Moxie snorted twice. He was done venting his anger. His interest waned. He leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes. Then, he impatiently said, Don't argue with me about the big principles. It's useless. If you're confident that you can convince your enemies with some bullshit reasoning, then there's no harm in doing so. If not, then shut your mouths as soon as possible. This young master has been busy for a long time. He needs to rest. The three women's faces turned red at first. But, after listening to June Moxie's words, they realized that they were reasonable even though they were extremely unpleasant to hear. They couldn't help but hang their heads in contemplation. Dugu Xiaoi pouted. She rolled her eyes. She snorted twice and wrinkled her nose. Then, she muttered, You're really unreasonable. Humph. You've given the wrong thing to someone else. What kind of person is this? I'm so angry. I'll remove that saber later. Let's see what else you can say. At this moment, the sound of heavy footsteps came from outside. At first, it sounded like a huge elephant was madly running towards them. The speed of the footsteps was frightening. It wasn't frightening that it was frightening. It was frightening that it was frightening that it was frightening. The three women looked at each other in dismay. Then, they heard a panting voice from outside. "I say, third young master, third ancestor, you're deliberately making me run until my legs break. Pity me. I've sweated a few dozen kilograms on the way here. What kind of medicine do you want in such a hurry? You even asked me to personally deliver it. Damn it. That's all. Let's go to the Spirit Fog Lake in the afternoon and have some fun." TSK, every time I think of the girls there, each and every one of them is pink and tender. Big Brother's mouth is continuously drooling. Oh, that's right. Let's first look for those big masters. I'll try out your if you don't pay after using it, it's not considered buying method. That's really amazing. Third young master, you're really an expert. Little brother admires you so much that he won't bow down. The identity of the person who had arrived was obvious. It went without saying, hearing this, the faces of the three women in the room turned as black as the bottom of a pot. It was frighteningly black. The three women revealed the same expression at the same time. They wanted to kill someone. It was truly a gaze that wanted to eat someone alive. Following the complaints and flattery, Tang Dashao dragged his big belly and panted as he entered the room. The threshold was too high. Fatty Tang had to exert a lot of effort to lift his belly with both hands before he could take a step in. As soon as he entered the room, he didn't even have the time to speak. He was shocked to see the three beautiful women fiercely glaring at him. It was as if they wanted to swallow him whole. He was immediately stunned on the spot. Suddenly, he screamed, "My mother!" Chapter 273. The three women were not willing to let him go. They pounced on him at the same time. How could Fatty Tang's speed compare to the three agile ladies? Sun Xiaomei grabbed his ear and dragged him back. Fatty Tang could not help but wail and beg, but in the blink of an eye, he was abused. "You Fatty Tang! How dare you seduce June Sunshao to go to those ridiculous places? See if I don't light up your fat body into a sky lantern today. You're really promising to actually talk about girls." Sun Xiaomei took the lead and made the first move. The three women were scolded by June Moxie, but did not dare to refute. Everyone had accumulated a bellyful of anger, and Fatty was the perfect target for them to vent their anger. If they did not need him to vent their anger, then that would be a real waste of God's gift. Moreover, there was a reason for it, and it was a fair and reasonable use. Tang Yuan's snot and tears flowed together. His fat face and body were the same color. In an instant, his chubby face and round body suffered countless punches and kicks. For a moment, white, green, purple, black, everything was there. His screams shook the heavens and the earth. He begged June Sunshao to be merciful and save his brother from the fire and water, but there was no reply. It seemed that dealing with Fatty was also a strenuous job. The three women were so tired that they finally stopped. Only then did they remember that there was still the real culprit next to them. Now that they had something on him, they could finally vent their anger. Tang Yuan also finally raised his head and wanted to complain a little. "June Moxie, I didn't expect you." Suddenly, the three women stopped talking at the same time. The room was silent. Looking at the place where June Moxie was originally sitting, the four of them were dumbfounded at the same time. June Dashao had disappeared without them knowing, even the herbs on the ground were gone. This action was extremely fast. News came from the palace that old Master Tang was ordered to bring his eldest grandson, Tang Yuan, to the palace for an audience the next morning. Old Master Tang Wanli did not know the reason, but he could not disobey the emperor's orders. He could only send someone to the June family to bring back the eldest grandson that he had expelled from the family. The ashen-faced Tang Dashao repeatedly kowtowed to all the gods and Buddhas and finally escaped from the sea of suffering. He didn't even have time to change his clothes and fled in a sorry state. For the first time, he felt that his grandfather was really cute. He was like a deity who came to save the world. As time passed, the sky gradually darkened. The June family's courtyard was abruptly lit. A banquet had been arranged in the front hall for the two honored guests, General Dugu and Minister Sunday. The standard of this banquet was quite high. Grandpa June and June Wui were personally attending, but June Moxie seemed to have evaporated without a trace. This made the three female soldiers who were gnashing their teeth and wanting to settle the score with him even angrier. It was not until late at night, when everyone was asleep, that June Moxie sneakily appeared from the Hongjun Pagoda. He glanced left and right before entering his bedroom. What a joke! I, June Dashao, am not hiding from those three silly girls. They are just three little girls, what am I afraid of? I am hiding, just to prepare the medicine for Yi Gohan. As the saying goes, saving a person is like putting out a fire. How can it be delayed? Although it took a little longer to prepare the medicine, don't people need rest? What a fuss! June Dashao comforted himself for a while. He had only spent half an hour to prepare the anesthetic. He took one for oral administration and the other for external application. He walked over to the bed and began to treat Yi Gohan's bone injuries. It took a lot of effort this time to finally connect the broken ribs in Yi Gohan's chest like a piece of embroidery. Jun Mosie's clothes were drenched in sweat. He was exhausted. He sat down without the slightest bit of bearing. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "My God, this is really not a job for a human to do. I won't do such a strenuous and unrewarding thing again. Even if you beat me to death, I won't do it again. Damn it, I almost lost half my life." At this moment, June Moxie suddenly felt an inexplicable chill throughout his body. He felt the hair on his body stand up. The atmosphere in the air had suddenly become extremely vicious. It was filled with an awe-inspiring murderous aura. June Moxie suddenly raised his head and looked outside. He had already released his amazing spirit sense. Suddenly, an earth-shattering and violent aura erupted somewhere in the Tianxiang city. It spread for dozens of miles. This aura was filled with endless rage and heartache. Yes, it was pain. It was just a faintly discernible aura, but it made people feel the grief of the person who had emitted this aura. This was a very real feeling. Jun Mosie was certain that the owner of this aura belonged to a top-notch expert. Moreover, this person was the strongest expert that the hitman Jun had ever seen in his second life. In fact, this person was even stronger than Shurchang Xiao and the solitary falcon. A super expert who had fallen into endless rage and extreme grief for some reason. Just as Jun Mosie was nervously thinking about what had happened, a murderous voice suddenly broke the silence. It sounded like a thunderclap. It rolled across the sky like a tsunami. "Solitary eagle. One Song you. You two bastards, get out here right now." Then, a desolate and indignant roar resounded in the sky. The person who had emitted this voice didn't care that this was the capital of the Tianxiang Empire. Moreover, there were countless ordinary people below. Moreover, it was already late at night. He didn't care at all. Instead, he activated his Xian Qi and shouted at the top of his voice. The long roar was like the roar of a dragon or a tiger, shaking the earth and reverberating in the sky above the entire Tianxiang city. It didn't take long before the roar didn't slow down at all. Instead, it was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, and the rivers were flowing in reverse. It seemed as if countless people were roaring in unison in the sky. For a moment, everyone woke up from their dreams. Even those who were in deep sleep were no exception. Then, they felt that their ears couldn't hear anything other than this rumbling sound. On the roof of the magnificent Jewel Hall, an aloof and thin man dressed in black stood there. He was roaring unscrupulously. His voice was full of grief and indignation, anger, fury, and a tyrannical murderous aura. "You have the guts to kill, but don't have the guts to face me? Solitary eagle. One Song you. Are the two of you dead? Cowards who don't dare to take responsibility for their actions." The man dressed in black shouted again. His voice was even louder. Many people who were close to him heard a loud bang in their ears. Then, they couldn't hear anything else. Their ears were bleeding. Their eardrums had ruptured, and they had lost their hearing. A loud roar came from the June family's courtyard and the imperial palace at the same time. It was like the cry of an eagle in the sky, and the roar of an old dragon. The three earth-shattering sound waves intertwined with each other, and the pressure on the people below was greatly reduced. Bang! In Jun Wui's courtyard, a vigorous figure flew up like a goshawk. With a continuous roar, he rose to a height of 10 feet. Then, he circled in the air, and flew towards the direction of the magnificent Jewel Hall. The cold-blooded master, Lei Wu Bei. So, it's you. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Solitary Eagle laughed as he flew like a meteor. Today, let me see why a cold-blooded guy like Lei Wu Bei can be ranked 5th among the 8 great masters. At the same time, a gentle voice came from the direction of the imperial palace. Master Lei, Master Solitary Eagle, this little brother, Wen Song Yu, pays his respects to the 2 great masters. Wen Song Yu was Mr. Wen from the imperial palace. His voice was unusually gentle and soft. It didn't seem to be hurried, and it didn't seem as if he was using any strength. However, his gentle voice was still clearly audible in the midst of the sound effects of the 2 great masters. He didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. It could be seen that Mr. Wen's Xian cultivation wasn't as good as the 2 great masters, but it was almost the same. The 3 men were standing on the roof of the magnificent Jewel Hall. The stars were shining in the sky, and the roofs of the houses were continuous. The streets and alleys were crisscrossed. The autumn wind was whistling, and the 3 men's clothes were fluttering in the wind. The cold-blooded master, Lei Wu Bei, had arrived in person. There's going to be a good show to watch. This old man had 10 apprentices. 4 of them were dead, and 3 of them were crippled. Moreover, they were crippled to the point where they couldn't even recover. I'll have to see how this guy flips out. If I can get rid of that guy from the imperial palace, then it'll be a great help to me. Hitman Jun heard that this man was Lei Wu Bei. But he didn't feel the slightest bit of fear in his heart, even though he had already experienced the cold-blooded master's frightening power. Instead, he quickly activated the yin-yang escape, and followed behind the solitary falcon. Jun Wui's blue robe fluttered in the wind as soon as he left. He saw that only Yi Gohan was lying on the floor. There was no one else in the room. Jun Wui couldn't help but smile bitterly. His nephew's methods were heaven-defying, but his courage was equally heaven-defying. Lei Wu Bei's stature was tall, and he had no beard on his pale face. The stars were twinkling in the sky, but the earth was shrouded in darkness. Lei Wu Bei's eyes shone brightly in the darkness. They flickered with a ruthless and cold color. However, one could see that the cold-blooded master's eyes were filled with a deep sorrow. And it was impossible to get rid of that sorrow. He was known as the cold-blooded master. However, he had painstakingly cultivated 10 apprentices, and 3 of them had suddenly died. This cold-blooded master couldn't be exempted from this. Perhaps no one could be exempted from this custom. Lei Wu Bei had been able to cultivate 10 disciples of the Tianxian forest at the same time. It could be said that it was a great achievement for him. However, the other 7 great masters didn't have such an achievement. However, 2/3 of his 10 disciples had been lost in less than a month's time. Lei Wu Bei's cultivation was astonishing, but he still couldn't get rid of this blow. However, Jun Mo Xie wasn't in the mood to experience Lei Wu Bei's pain. Instead, he had suddenly discovered a very interesting phenomenon. Perhaps it should be said that it was a wonderful feeling. He had discovered that the top experts he had encountered since he had crossed over to this world were Lei Wu Bei, Shi Changshao, Solitary Eagle, and the 2 demon beast kings of the Tian Fa forest. Then, there was Mr. Wen, the Silver Blizzard City's 3 great masters, Elder Shin Xian, and the Yu Tang Empire's imperial teacher, Fei Mengqian. Moreover, it wasn't very obvious from Mr. Wen's point of view. But the solitary falcon and the other great master-level experts all had one thing in common. Chapter 274. Yes, it was lonely. It seemed that no matter where they stood, no matter how many people were around them, these people were always exceptionally lonely. They were completely out of tune with their surroundings. It seemed as if they were the only person in the boundless world. It was a kind of heroic loneliness. It was also a kind of desolate loneliness. Is this the price one must pay to become a great master? Or perhaps, it's lonely at the top? Will I be as lonely as they are if I reach such a realm in the future? However, I believe that I have reached the pinnacle of loneliness in this world. June Moxie Lengling snorted in his heart. I may not be as strong as you, but I'm much lonelier than you are. June Moxie continued to ponder in his heart. Then, he saw two shadows flashing as they climbed onto the roof. Their white beards were fluttering in the wind, and their faces were dignified. These two men were the third elder of the Silver Blizzard City, and the ninth elder. The two great masters have graced us with your presence, and Brother One has also appeared here. It is an honor for the Silver Blizzard City. Would the three of you please come down and have a cup of fragrant tea? The third elder cupped his hands in obeisance and smiled. He could clearly see that the three men were ready to jump at each other's throat. But he was the leader of the Silver Blizzard City's people. So, he couldn't afford to lose the Silver Blizzard City's grace. Therefore, he braced himself and said these words even though they weren't suitable for the occasion. Lei Wu Bei laughed mournfully, and ignored the third elder's question. He then shouted, "Solitary Eagle, my sixth disciple has suffered a broken bone, and will be disabled for life. Did you do this?" The third elder's face was filled with embarrassment. No matter how strong he was still representing the Silver Blizzard City. Lei Wu Bei's disregard for him made him angry. But he suppressed the anger in his heart when he saw Lei Wu Bei's crazed expression. The solitary eagle laughed and casually said, "Brother Lei, why are you so angry? He's only a disciple. This old man is kind enough to discipline him for you. Besides, you have 10 disciples. It doesn't matter if 1 or 2 of them are crippled. By the way, he seems to be the only one among your 10 disciples who didn't enter Tianxian. Such trash, it doesn't matter if he's crippled. I'm cleaning up the trash on your behalf, lest you feel embarrassed to do it yourself. Don't you agree?" Ha ha, ha ha. Lei Wu Bei's powerful aura suddenly calmed down. It seemed as if an invisible undercurrent was slowly surging around his body. He stared fixedly at Solitary Eagle, and the murderous intention in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. He slowly nodded and said in a low voice, "Good. Very good. Solitary Falcon, you're indeed worthy of being called an Elder Master. You're very skilled in dealing with a junior, and it's as easy as lifting a finger." Solitary Eagle snorted as he looked disdainfully at Lei Wu Bei. He sneered and said, "What? Do you want to avenge your disciple? I've been waiting for this opportunity for 30 years, Lei Wu Bei. I've long felt that there was something wrong with the rankings." Lei Wu Bei suppressed his smile and said, "Don't be anxious if you want to die. Solitary Eagle, I'm very interested to know how my disciple has offended you. How could he have made you act so viciously in spite of your status?" Solitary Eagle Lengling replied, "Offended me? Is he worthy? I just don't like him. Lei Wu Bei, is this reason enough?" Lei Wu Bei's 6th disciple had stolen the Xiandan from Solitary Eagle's bosom while he was besieged by Shi Changshao and the others. He had nearly succeeded in doing so, and had caused Solitary Eagle to lose face. But how could Solitary Eagle explain such a thing? It didn't matter if there was a reason or not. Lei Wu Bei's condescending tone made the Solitary Falcon refuse to explain anything. One must die for blaspheming a great master. One must not bow one's head between great masters. Who was right and who was wrong? Strength was the only way to reason. This reason is very good. It's very good. Solitary eagle, I will remember this reason. Lei Wu Bei laughed sorrowfully. He then turned to Wen Songyu and said in a dignified voice, Brother Wen, are you from there? Are you stationed in the Tianxiang Empire? Wen Songyu smiled gently and said, Great Master Lei's eyes are as bright as a torch. That's right, I am the guardian of the Tianxiang Empire. Lei Wu Bei slightly closed his eyes. The world suddenly darkened without his flickering eyes. But after a moment, he opened his eyes again. Suddenly, a cruel and vicious green light shot out from his eyes. It made people feel as if the wind was whistling and the ghost flames were flickering. He said in an incomparably cold voice, Wen Songyu, you are the protector of the Supreme Alliance. You have no reason to kill my 4 disciples. Do you think that the guardian of the Tianxiang Empire can act unscrupulously? Wen Songyu faintly sighed. He looked up at the sky, and a thin layer of anger flashed across his face. He was uncomfortable with Lei Wu Bei's indiscriminate aggressiveness, but he remembered his duty. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He pondered for a long time. Then, he lowered his head and looked at Lei Wu Bei. He then said faintly, Great Master Lei, there is a public opinion on who is right and who is wrong. I won't talk nonsense with you. But I have to make one thing clear. Believe it or not, I didn't kill your disciples. Wen Songyu said in a deep voice, I will explain this to you only once. Whether you believe it or not, accept it or not, I will definitely learn from Master Lei's skills from your questioning and ridicule in the future. Lei Wu Bei was silent for a moment. Then, he said indifferently, Since Brother Wen has said so, how can I not believe it? His voice was still cold. But the murderous aura had suddenly disappeared. It seemed a little gentle, but if Brother Wen wants to teach me, I can accompany you any time. However, who was the one who killed my disciple? Can Brother Wen enlighten me? Lei Wu Bei is willing to apologize for my previous disrespect if Brother Wen is willing to tell me the truth. Lei Wu Bei's hands were hanging down from his sleeves. This was a gesture of friendship. Lei Wu Bei's status was very high. He had spoken to another person in such a manner because of his disciple. Even if that person had the strength of a spirit Xian expert, it was still very rare and commendable. That person's origin is mysterious and unpredictable. His strength is also mysterious. I am very interested in him. But I have no clue about him. I was even silently framed by him. This person's methods are brilliant and I, am sincerely convinced. Wen Songyu laughed heartily. He didn't look ashamed even though he had exposed his own shortcomings. He showed a rare open-mindedness even though he had been framed. It seemed as if this matter was a trivial matter to him. However, if we want to find that person, we'll need Supreme Su Lei to do it personally. This one has already conceded defeat and is powerless to do anything. Many thanks to Brother Wen. Lei Wu Bei cupped his hands in obeisance. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, Brother Wen, please do as you wish. Wen Songyu laughed. He cupped his hands in obeisance and said, The mountains are high and the rivers are long. Let us meet again. I have a duty to fulfill. Please forgive me for taking my leave. His hands were still clasped in front of his chest. His body was like a leaf that was suddenly blown up by a gust of wind, floating up into the sky. He retreated. His thin body was like a piece of paper that swayed twice in the night sky before disappearing without a trace. Jun Dashao cursed in his heart as he watched this. Motherf ****. These great masters are trying to explain their misunderstandings. Isn't it too easy? How could the cold-blooded great master, Lei Wu Bei, believe it so easily? Someone said that he didn't do it, and the 5th great master of the 8 great masters believed it. Can't Mr. Wen lie? He's too gullible. I'm speechless. Cursing in his heart was one thing. However, June Moxie also understood that there was no need to lie when one's cultivation had reached such a high level. No one would be afraid of trouble at such a high level. On the contrary, an explanation was quite rare. Generally speaking, they would disdain to explain even if there was a misunderstanding, because an explanation in itself was a sign of weakness. It was the same with Solitary Eagle, and after Wen Songyu's explanation, Lei Wu Bei immediately believed him. Moreover, his attitude towards Wen Songyu had changed. Lei Wu Bei couldn't do anything if Wen Songyu didn't want to explain. However, Wen Songyu had explained. His Xian cultivation wasn't as good as Lei Wu Bei's, but he had given Lei Wu Bei a lot of face due to his status. Someone from that place? June Moxie's attention shifted to this sentence. He thought to himself, what is that place? Why does it seem that even Lei Wu Bei, one of the 8 great masters, is afraid of it? Is there something fishy going on? Lei Wu Bei turned to look at Solitary Eagle with his hands clasped behind his back. Lengling snorted and said, Eagle, it's only the 2 of us now. Then, she flung her sleeves at the 3rd elder and the 9th elder. She then shouted, You're not Han Feng Shui. You don't have the qualifications to get involved in this matter. Go down. A strong wind whistled through the air. The 3rd and 9th elders felt pain in their faces. They were angry, but they had no other choice. They cupped their hands in obeisance, and jumped down along with the strong wind. Their hearts were filled with resentment. Let's see if you still dare to be so arrogant when the people from the Silver City arrive. Solitary Eagle laughed. He stood up like a goshawk soaring into the sky. He laughed and said, What a good teacher and disciple! Come with me if you want to avenge your disciple. Lei Wu Bei let out a sharp whistling sound. It seemed as if thousands of ghosts had rushed out of the gates of hell. His body slowly rose into the air, and he followed Solitary Eagle. The 2 figures disappeared in the blink of an eye. The night was as cold as water. June Mo Xie silently activated the yin-yang escape, and tailed behind the 2 of them, following them closely. It had to be said that a great master was a great master. June Moxie's speed when using the yin-yang escape was at an astonishing level. However, it was very strenuous for him to follow these 2 men. In other words, the young Master June was the only one who was following them. No one in the Tianxiang city would be able to keep up with him. That included the mysterious Mr. One. The Solitary Falcon's goshawk agility was one of the best in the Xian continent, and the Solitary Falcon was confident that he could be considered as one of the 8 great masters. Therefore, he was going all out in order to show Lei Wu Bei his strength. Lei Wu Bei didn't dare to be negligent. Therefore, the 2 of them began to compete in terms of their agility skills. The 2 men had only exchanged words with each other, and hadn't started fighting. However, they had already competed twice. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.